Hello guys, welcome to Soul Fiction. So in this video, we will see, what if Naruto wielded Gilgamesh's Gate of Babylon fate? If you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to show us some love by hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. Your support means the world to us. Now, let's start the story. Chapter 1. The Golden Temple. The kunai whistled through the dense forest air, embedding itself into the bark of an ancient cedar with a solid thunk. Naruto Uzumaki landed on the branch beside it, his breath coming in controlled bursts as he scanned the forest floor below. 3 days of pursuit had led him deep into the untamed wilderness beyond Fire Country's borders, farther than he'd ever ventured alone. "You can't hide forever," he muttered, retrieving his kunai with a sharp tug. The missing nin he tracked, Yoshiro Kagami, formerly of the Hidden Stone, had stolen a sealed scroll from Konoha's archives containing Forbidden Earth-style techniques. Standard retrieval mission, or so Tsunade had said. What she hadn't mentioned was Kagami's unnerving ability to meld with the very earth itself, leaving no trail for even Naruto's shadow clones to follow. A flicker of movement caught his eye, a disturbance in the underbrush about 200 meters ahead. Naruto formed the familiar cross-shaped hand seal. Shadow clone jutsu. 2 perfect copies of himself materialized beside him in puffs of smoke. Without a word, they split off in different directions, fanning out to encircle the area where he'd spotted movement. Naruto had learned patience over the years. Gone was the brash 12-year-old who would have charged in shouting. At 19, he understood the value of strategy. The forest grew denser as he advanced, the trees more ancient, their massive roots creating natural archways and hollows. Strange symbols had been carved into some of the trunks, old, weathered by centuries of rain and wind, but still faintly visible. Naruto didn't recognize the script, but something about the markings made the hair on the back of his neck stand up. A memory from one of his clones suddenly flooded his consciousness as it dispelled. Kagami crouched beside a moss-covered stone structure partially buried in the hillside ahead. The missing nin had placed his palm against what appeared to be a door, channeling chakra I. NTO ancient seals that glowed faintly in response. Naruto quickened his pace, moving silently through the canopy. Whatever Kagami was after, it wasn't just the scroll anymore. These woods felt wrong, heavy with an energy that wasn't chakra. Something older and deeper that made his skin prickle. He arrived at the edge of a small clearing in time to see Kagami slip through a narrow opening in what was now clearly a temple entrance. The structure was predominantly buried in the hillside, with only its facade visible, weathered stone covered in vines and moss, inscribed with the same strange symbols he'd seen on the trees. His remaining clone appeared on the opposite side of the clearing, signaling that they were alone. Naruto nodded and the clone vanished in a puff of smoke. Taking a deep breath, he approached the entrance. Kunai at the ready, the opening was barely wide enough for his shoulders. Naruto squeezed through, finding himself in a narrow passageway that sloped gently downward. Air inside was surprisingly dry and carried a metallic scent he couldn't place. No footprints marked the dusty floor, but there was only one way forward. The passage opened into a vast underground chamber that stole Naruto's breath. Massive columns carved to resemble ancient trees supported a ceiling lost in shadow. The walls were lined with stone shelves containing clay tablets, crumbling scrolls, and artifacts he couldn't identify. In the center of the chamber stood a raised dais, upon which rested a single stone pedestal bathed in a shaft of light from somewhere above. And there was Kagami, standing before the pedestal. The stolen scroll open in his hands as he compared its contents to inscriptions on the pedestal itself. "I knew someone would follow," Kagami said without turning. "I didn't expect it would be the famous Naruto Uzumaki." His voice echoed in the cavernous space. "Tell me, did the Hokage mention what was in this scroll when she sent you after me?" Naruto stepped into the chamber, keeping a wary distance. "I don't need to know what's in it. It belongs to Konoha." Kagami chuckled, finally turning to face him. He was older than Naruto had expected, perhaps in his 50s. With deep lines etched into a face weathered by harsh elements. His gray-streaked hair was tied back in a simple knot, and his eyes, sharp and calculating, studied Naruto with undisguised interest. "Such loyalty," he said. "But you really should ask more questions. This scroll contains partial directions to this very temple, written by the second Hokage himself. He gestured around them. Do you know what this place is? I'm guessing it's not a vacation spot, Naruto replied, edging closer while taking in potential escape routes and vantage points. The chamber had multiple shadowed alcoves and what appeared to be additional passages leading deeper into the hillside. This is the Temple of Crossing Bridges, Kagami said, turning back to the pedestal. Built thousands of years ago, long before the hidden villages. Before ninjutsu as we know it existed. His fingers traced the inscriptions. It speaks of treasuries beyond imagining, weapons of the gods, and doors between worlds. If you're after weapons, there are easier ways to get them than digging up old temples. Not weapons like these. Kagami's voice took on a reverent quality. The inscription speaks of the king's trees. Yuri, a collection of every treasure and weapon ever created, stored in a space between dimensions. The scroll contains the ritual to access it. Something cold settled in Naruto's stomach. He'd seen enough in his life to know that ancient temples and forbidden rituals rarely led to anything good. Step away from the pedestal, he said, dropping into a fighting stance. We're leaving, and you're Ming back to Konoha to answer for the theft. Kagami sighed. I've spent 20 years searching for this place. I'm not leaving without what I came for. His hands flashed through a series of unfamiliar signs. Earth style. Stone sentinel jutsu. The floor trembled. From the shadows of the alcoves, 6 stone statues, warriors in ancient armor, stepped forward, their empty eyes fixed on Naruto. They moved with surprising fluidity for beings made of solid rock. Keep him occupied, Kagami commanded them, turning back to the pedestal and beginning to channel chakra into it. The inscriptions began to glow with a golden light. Naruto didn't wait for the stone sentinels to reach him. He created a dozen shadow clones that immediately engaged the stone warriors, kunai sparking against rock as they sought weak points. The original Naruto charged directly at Kagami, drawing on the Nine Tails chakra enough to enhance his speed. But Kagami had anticipated this. Without looking up from his work, he slammed his palm to the ground. Earth style. Swallowing maw. The stone floor beneath Naruto liquefied, becoming a churning pit that caught his feet and rapidly rose to his knees. He struggled against the viscous stone. But it only pulled him deeper. I don't want to kill you, Kagami said, still focused on the pedestal where the golden glow had intensified. But I can't have you interrupting. Alignment is perfect today. It won't come again for another century. Across the chamber, the stone sentinels were smashing through Naruto's clones one by one. The quicksand-like stone had reached his waist now, threatening to entomb him completely. Naruto closed his eyes, drawing deeper on the Nine Tails chakra. The familiar sensation of wild energy flooded his system, not the full-tailed beast mode, but enough to envelop his body in a golden aura. With a roar of effort, he tore himself free of the liquefied stone, landing in a crouch several meters away. That's enough, he shouted, forming a swirling ball of chakra in his palm. Rasengan. He lunged at Kagami, but the missing nin was faster than he appeared. He sidestepped, simultaneously completing the ritual with a final surge of chakra into the pedestal. Too late, Kagami whispered as the golden light from the inscriptions intensified to blinding brilliance. Naruto's Rasengan struck the pedestal instead, the resulting explosion, sending both men flying in opposite directions. The stone pedestal shattered, fragments peppering the chamber like shrapnel. For a moment, nothing happened. The stone sentinels froze in place. Kagami stared in horror at the destroyed pedestal. You fool, he screamed. Do you realize what you've? His words died as a low rumble shook the chamber. At the center of the dais where the pedestal had stood, the air itself seemed to ripple and tear. A small rift appeared, edges glimmering with golden light. It widened slowly, revealing nothing but a swirling golden void beyond. Yes, Kagami breathed, his anger forgotten as he struggled to his feet. The gate, it's opening. The rift continued to expand, and from within it emerged what appeared to be the hilt of a sword, ornate, golden, and rad. Adding power unlike anything Naruto had ever felt. It wasn't chakra, not exactly, but something both more ancient and more refined. Kagami reached for the sword, his face transformed by naked greed. Don't touch it, Naruto shouted, but his warning came too late. As Kagami's fingers closed around the hilt, golden light surged up his arm. He screamed, not in pain but in ecstasy, as the light spread across his body. For a moment, he appeared transcendent, wrapped in divine radiance. Then the light turned harsh, too bright to look upon. Kagame's screams transformed from joy to agony. His body began to disintegrate, breaking apart into motes of golden dust that were sucked back into the rift. "The worthy king," were his final words before he vanished entirely. The sword remained, floating in the air before the rift, which had stabilized into a perfect circle about 2 meters in diameter. Naruto approached cautiously, the remaining stone sentinels now lifeless heaps on the floor. The sword seemed to pulse with awareness, as if studying him in return. "What are you?" he whispered. Something brushed against his mind. Not words exactly, but impressions. Ancient, power, treasury, king, judgment. Inscriptions on the chamber walls began to glow, casting their golden light upon the floating sword and the rift behind it. Naruto realized he could suddenly read them, though the language had been incomprehensible moments before. "The king's treasury opens only to the worthy," he read aloud. "To claim the gate is to bear the burden of all treasures, all knowledge, all glory of humanity's creation." The sword rotated slowly, pointing its hilt toward him in what felt unmistakably like an offering. Everything in Naruto's training and experience screamed that he should leave, seal the temple, report back to Tsunade. But something deeper called to him. Not the 9 tails, but his own innate sense that this moment was meant for him. The sword waited, patient and eternal. With a deep breath, Naruto reached out and grasped the hilt. Unlike Kagami, no disintegration followed. Instead, knowledge poured into him, images, sensations, memories not his own. A golden city rising from an ancient desert. A man with crimson eyes and golden armor who called himself king of all he surveyed. Battles with gods and monsters. A treasury containing every treasure ever created or that ever would be created. The Gate of Babylon. Gilgamesh's ultimate legacy. The rift expanded suddenly, and from within it emerged dozens, then hundreds of weapons. Swords, spears, axes, hammers, weapons Naruto couldn't even name. All suspended in the golden void. Each radiated power. Each had a history, a name, a purpose. And somehow, Naruto knew them all. The weapons began to orbit around him, a whirlwind of lethal artistry. Before suddenly vanishing back into the rift, the golden void contracted until only a small tear remained, which settled into Naruto's chest like a medallion of light before fading from this ability, though he could still feel its presence, a warmth just beneath his skin. The chamber darkened as the inscriptions ceased their glow. Only the shaft of natural light from above remained, illuminating Naruto and the now empty dais. He stood in shocked silence, trying to process what had happened. The sword he'd touched was gone, returned to the treasury with the others, but he could feel it waiting, ready to be called forth again. All of them waited, an arsenal beyond imagining, now somehow connected to him. A thunderous crack broke his reverie. The chamber was collapsing, great chunks of ceiling beginning to fall. Without the magic that had sustained it for centuries, the ancient temple was finally succumbing to time. Naruto ran, navigating the crumbling passages by instinct more than sight. He burst from the temple entrance just as it collapsed behind him, the hillside partially caving in with a roar of displaced earth and stone. In the sudden silence that followed, Naruto stood panting, staring at the rubble that had been an ancient temple minutes before. Birds resumed their calls in the forest around him, oblivious to the monumental shift that had just occurred. He looked down at his hands, half expecting them to glow or change, but they appeared normal. Experimentally, he reached into that new warm space he felt inside himself, thinking of the sword he'd touched. Instantly, the air before him rippled with golden light, and the sword emerged, floating before him just as it had in the chamber. Up close, in natural light, he could see the exquisite craftsmanship, a blade that seemed to be made of some metal that wasn't quite steel, inscribed with runes that shifted as he looked at them, a hilt wrapped in leather that had somehow never aged. Durandal, he said, name coming to him from the knowledge that had poured into his mind. The legendary sword that had once cut through a mountain. He reached out, took it by the hilt, and was surprised by its perfect balance, as if it had been forged specifically for his hand. With a thought, he sent it back into the rippling golden portal, which vanished as quickly as it had appeared. Naruto sat heavily on a fallen log, trying to make sense of it all. The memories he'd received were fragmentary, but enough to understand the basics. The Gate of Babylon, a dimensional treasury containing the original forms of every treasure humanity had ever created. And he, somehow, had become its new wielder. Gilgamesh, the king of heroes from a world very different from his own. A collection of weapons beyond price or measure. Power that had driven Kagami to obsession and ultimately destroyed him. What am I supposed to do with this? He asked the silent forest. No answer came, but he felt a certainty growing within him. Whatever this power was, however it had come to him, he would use it as he had always used his abilities, to protect his friends, his village, his world. Standing, Naruto took one last look at the collapsed temple entrance before turning toward home. Tsunade would want a full report, though he wasn't sure how much he should reveal. This power, this gate, it would change everything. As he leapt into the trees to begin the long journey back to Konoha, he didn't notice the small golden ripple that formed briefly in his wake, nor the red eyes that watched from within it, ancient, calculating, and intensely curious about the new wielder of the king's treasury. By the time Naruto reached the familiar gates of Konoha 3 days later, he had experimented enough with the gate to understand some basic principles. He could summon individual weapons at will, though maintaining more than 3 or 4 at once required significant concentration. Each weapon had its own properties and powers, though most of these remained mysterious to him. More troubling were the dreams, vivid flashes of a life not his own. A golden city, a friend with green hair and chains instead of hands, a woman with violet eyes who brought flowers to a king who had everything yet valued nothing. A quest for immortality that ended in profound loss. Gilgamesh's memories, fragmented but intense, surfaced whenever Naruto slept. He woke each morning with new understanding of the gate, but also with a growing unease about the personality of its previous owner. Arrogant, ruthless, seeing himself above all laws and all fair beings, the king of heroes had been no hero by Naruto's definition. "Yo, Naruto," Kotetsu called from the guard station as he approached the village gates. "Back already? That was quick." Naruto forced a smile, pushing aside his troubled thoughts. "Yeah, wrapped it up faster than expected." It wasn't exactly a lie. The mission had indeed concluded more rapidly than anyone could have anticipated. Just not in the way Tsunade had intended. "The Hokage was asking about you yesterday," Azumo added. "Better report in right away." Naruto nodded, waving as he passed through the gates into the bustling streets of Konoha. The village was thriving in these years of relative peace following the Fourth Great Ninja War. Construction projects expanded the village boundaries, new businesses opened weekly, and the academy enrollment had doubled as parents felt secure enough to encourage their children toward ninja careers again. He made his way toward the Hokage Tower, stopping briefly at Ichiraku Ramen where Chuki insisted on serving him a free bowl for his return. As he ate, Naruto considered how to explain what had happened. The missing nin was gone, not captured or killed in the conventional sense, but essentially erased from existence. The scroll had been destroyed in the temple collapse, and he had returned with a power he barely understood himself. "Everything okay?" Ayame asked, noticing his distraction. "You're eating slower than usual." "Just tired from the mission," he replied with a reassuring grin. "Thanks for the ramen." Fortified by his favorite meal, Naruto continued to the Hokage Tower. As he climbed the stairs to Tsunade's office, he felt the warm presence of the gate within him stir slightly, as if reacting to his anxiety. "Calm down," he muttered to himself, or perhaps to the presence he now carried. "It's just a mission report." Shizune looked up from her desk as he entered the waiting area. "Naruto, we were starting to worry. Go right in. Lady Tsunade is expecting you." He found the fifth Hokage standing at the window, looking out over the village, a cup of sake in her hand despite the early hour. She turned as he entered, her amber eyes sharp and assessing. 3 days late, but at least you're in one piece, she said by way of greeting. Report. Naruto took a deep breath and began with the facts that were easiest to explain, tracking Kagami to the remote forest. Discovering the ancient temple, the missing nin's obsession with the king's treasury. He described the fight in the chamber, the destruction of the pedestal, and the temple's subsequent collapse. He hesitated when it came to explaining what had happened to Kagami and what he himself had gained. Something, perhaps Gilgamesh's innate suspicion of authority, cautioned him against revealing everything. Kagami was caught in the temple collapse, he said finally. I couldn't recover his body. The scroll was destroyed as well. Tsunade studied him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. And the king's treasury, he was so interested in. Just old stories, as far as I could tell, Naruto replied, meeting her gaze steadily. Whatever was there has been buried for good now. Another long silence followed as Tsunade continued to observe him. Finally, she sighed and returned to her desk. Write up your full report by tomorrow, she said, shuffling through a stack of papers. In the meantime, take a few days off. You look like you need the rest. Naruto bowed slightly. Thank you, Granny Tsunade. Her eye twitched at the nickname, but she let it pass. Dismissed. As Naruto turned to leave, she added, and Naruto, if you remember any additional details about what happened in that temple, my door is always open. He nodded, understanding the implicit message. She suspected there was more to the story, but she was giving him space to come to her when he was ready. Outside the Hokage Tower, Naruto found himself at a crossroads, both literally in the village square and figuratively in his life. The power he now possessed was unlike anything in the ninja world. If fully unleashed, it could shift the balance between nations. That kind of power would be coveted, feared, possibly even hunted. He needed to understand it better before deciding who to trust with the knowledge. A familiar voice broke through his thoughts. Earth to Naruto, are you sleepwalking? Sakura stood before him, hands on her hips. Her pink hair longer now and tied back for her hospital duties. She wore the white coat that marked her as one of Konoha's chief medical ninjas, Tsunade's prized student. Sakura, he exclaimed, genuinely happy to see his teammate. Sorry, just thinking about the mission. Must have been some mission to get you thinking so hard, she teased, falling into step beside him as he continued walking. Anything you can talk about. Standard retrieval, he said with a shrug. Just took longer than expected. She gave him a sidelong glance. You're a terrible liar, you know that. Your right eyebrow twitches. Does not, he protested, consciously trying to control his facial muscles. There it goes again, she laughed, then grew more serious. But seriously, are you okay? You seem different. Quote, Naruto considered his friend. If there was anyone he might trust with the truth, it would be Sakura or perhaps Kakashi. But not yet, not until he understood what he was dealing with. I'm fine, he assured her. Just tired. Granny Tsunade gave me a few days off, so I'm going to catch up on sleep. Well, if you need anything, you know where to find me, Sakura said. Clearly not entirely convinced but willing to let it go for now. Oh, and don't forget, Ichiraku's tomorrow night for Ino's birthday. Everyone's going to be there. Wouldn't miss it, Naruto promised as they reached the intersection where their paths diverged, Sakura toward the hospital, he toward his apartment. Alone again, Naruto took to the rooftops, preferring the quiet route above the bustling streets. His apartment was in a newer building now, an upgrade from his childhood home that had been destroyed during Pain's attack years ago. It was still modest by the standards of someone of his status. The hero of the Fourth Great Ninja War could have commanded much grander accommodations, but it suited him. Once inside, he dropped his travel pack and headed straight for the shower, letting hot water wash away the grime of travel and the lingering unease of his partial deception. Clean and dressed in fresh clothes, he stood in the center of his living room, eyeing the empty space. It was time to experiment properly. All right, he said aloud. Let's see what you can really do. Reaching into that warm space within himself, Naruto concentrated on the sensation of opening the gate. The air before him rippled and tore. Golden light spilling through as a portal opened, larger than before, about a meter in diameter. Beyond it, he could see hints of the infinite treasury, countless weapons suspended in a golden void. Focusing on a specific image in his mind, he called forth a simple sword. Nothing as legendary as Durandal, but a beautiful silver blade with a guard shaped like unfurling wings. It emerged from the portal and floated before him. With a thought, he sent it back and called forth a different weapon, a massive hammer that looked too heavy for any normal person to wield. Then a spear with a crimson blade. A shield etched with constellations. One after another, he summoned and dismissed various weapons, getting a feel for the process. Each time, it became slightly easier. The connection between his will and the gate strengthening. He discovered he could open multiple smaller portals simultaneously, positioning them strategically around the room. He practiced, calling forth specific weapons from specific portals, increasing the speed until the air was filled with the golden shimmer of portals opening and closing, weapons emerging and retreating in a dance choreographed by his thoughts. It was exhilarating and exhausting. After an hour of practice, Naruto collapsed onto his couch, sweat beading on his forehead. The gate required a different kind of energy than chakra, drawing not on his physical and spiritual reserves but on something deeper, something connected to will and intent. This is going to take some getting used to, he muttered. As he rested, he explored the fragments of knowledge that had come with the gate. Gilgamesh had been the king of a city called Uruk in ancient Mesopotamia, a civilization that had no equivalent in Naruto's world. Half god, half human. He had collected treasures and weapons from across his realm and beyond, storing them in a dimensional treasury that became known as the Gate of Babylon. But how had this power crossed between worlds? Why had it accepted him when it had rejected, no, destroyed, Kagami? A knock at his door interrupted his thoughts. Cautiously extending his senses, another habit he'd picked up. During the war, Naruto recognized the familiar chakra signature. He opened the door to find Kakashi standing there, his visible eye curved in its characteristic smile. "Yo," his former teacher greeted him casually. "Heard you were back, Kakashi-sensei," Naruto replied, stepping aside to let him in. "What brings you here?" The silver-haired Jonin entered, glancing around the apartment with deceptive nonchalance. "Just checking in. Tsunade mentioned your mission had some unusual elements." Naruto kept his expression neutral. "Did she?" Kakashi settled into an armchair, his posture relaxed but his eyes sharp. "Something about an ancient temple and a missing nin who was a little too interested in old legends." "That about sums it up," Naruto confirmed, taking a seat across from him. "The temple collapsed with Kagami inside. Not much else to tell." "I see." Kakashi studied him for a moment longer before changing tack. "You know, I ran into an interesting situation during my Anbu days. Ancient structure, mysterious artifacts, the usual. Turned out to be a chakra amplifier from the Sage of Six Paths era. Nearly killed my entire squad before we contained it." Naruto understood the message. Kakashi was telling him, in his roundabout way, that he had experience with ancient powers and could be trusted. "If I'd found something like that," Naruto said carefully, "I'd probably NT to understand it before bringing it back to the village." Kakashi nodded. "Wise approach. Some things need to be calibrated before they're introduced to a population center." He stood, apparently satisfied with this oblique exchange. "Well, I should let you rest. Oh, and if you happen to be calibrating anything interesting, Training Ground 44 is pretty isolated. Fewer questions if things get flashy." With that parting advice, Kakashi showed himself out, leaving Naruto to ponder the conversation. His former teacher had essentially given him permission to keep his secret for now, offering both assistance and a safe place to practice. Night had fallen while they talked. Naruto moved to the window, looking out over the village lights. Tomorrow he would take Kakashi's suggestio and head to Training Ground 44, the infamous Forest of Death, where he could truly test the limits of the gate without worrying about observers. But for now, he needed rest. As he prepared for bed, Naruto couldn't shake the feeling that his life had irrevocably changed, that he stood at the beginning of a path that would lead him far from the familiar world of ninjas and chakra. "What would you do with this power, Gilgamesh?" he asked the empty room. In his mind, he thought he heard a low, arrogant laugh, the king amused by a commoner's question. But there was no answer, only the echo of his own thoughts and the warm presence of the gate, waiting to be called upon again. Naruto slept, and dreamed of golden cities and battles with gods. Dawn found Naruto already deep within Training Ground 44, having slipped past the perimeter guards before they began their morning shift. The Forest of Death lived up to its ominous name. Massive trees created a perpetual twilight beneath their canopy, Our most predatory beasts prowled the undergrowth, and poisonous plants abounded. It was the perfect place to remain undisturbed. He had chosen a clearing about 5 kilometers from the forest's edge, far enough that even the most dramatic displays of power wouldn't be detected from outside. The space was roughly circular, about 50 meters across, bordered by trees that seemed to reach forever upward. No one to bother us here, he said to himself, rolling his shoulders to loosen them. Taking a deep breath, Naruto reached for the gate. This time, instead of a single portal, he opened 10 simultaneously, arranging them in a circle around the clearing. From each, he called forth a different weapon, letting them hover in the air before him. Swords, spears, axes, hammers, each radiating power th. It seemed to distort the very air around it. With a gesture, he sent them flying toward a massive dead tree at the edge of the clearing. The weapons struck with devastating force, obliterating the iron trunk and continuing through several trees beyond before Naruto recalled them to the portals. Too much power, he muttered, surveying the destruction. He needed more precision, more control. For the next several hours, he practiced calling specific weapons for specific purposes. He discovered that while some, like Durandal, were purely physical in nature, albeit supernaturally sharp and durable, others possessed special properties. A black bow that fired arrows of concentrated light. A dagger that could cut through space itself, creating temporary rifts. A shield that absorbed and redirected energy. Each weapon seemed to carry not only its own power but its own story, its own personality. Some felt eager in his grasp, while others seemed to carry a hint of reluctance, as if judging whether he was worthy to wield them. Most intriguing was a set of golden chains that emerged from the portals with a distinctive sound, almost like laughter. Enkidu, he said, the name coming to him from the fragmented memories. These chains had been used by Gilgamesh to bind gods themselves, growing stronger in proportion to the divinity of their target. Naruto directed the chains toward a boulder, watching as they wrapped around it and constricted with inexorable force. The stone cracked, then shattered under the pressure. Against a normal opponent, they would be instantly lethal, but against something like the Nine Tails. That thought gave him pause. How would this new power interact with the being sealed within him? Kurama had been quiet since the temple incident, which was unusual. Typically, the Nine Tails had something sarcastic to say about any significant development in Naruto's life. Dismissing the weapons and closing the portals, Naruto sat cross-legged in the center of the clearing. He closed his eyes, diving into his mindscape where Kurama resided. He found himself standing before the familiar giant fox, who lay with his head on his paws, nine tails swaying slowly behind him. The seal that once imprisoned him had been modified years ago, creating a partnership rather than a prison, but Kurama still preferred this space for their conversations. I was wondering when you'd check in, the fox rumbled, opening one massive eye. Enjoying your new toy? You know about it, Naruto said. It wasn't a question. Of course I know about it, Kurama replied with a snort. I'm sealed inside you. I felt the moment that foreign power latched onto your soul. He raised his head, both eyes now fixed on Naruto. The question is whether you understand what you've connected yourself to. Naruto frowned. The Gate of Babylon. Gilgamesh's treasury. Yes, but what is Gilgamesh? Who is he? And more importantly, where does he come from? The fox's tails lashed with agitation. That power doesn't belong in this world. Kit, it operates on different rules, different laws. I've noticed, Naruto admitted. It's not chakra, but it's not chakra either. It's like it's adapting to work here. Kurama nodded. Precisely. It's changing to function in our reality, using your chakra network as a conduit. But that adaptation goes both ways. His expression grew serious. Your chakra is changing too. Becoming something hybrid. That explained the strange sensations Naruto had been experiencing, the feeling that his energy was flowing differently, responding to his will in new ways. Is it dangerous? He asked. Everything powerful is dangerous, Kurama replied. But no, I don't think it will harm you. In fact, the fox hesitated. It seems to be forming a symbiotic relationship with my chakra. The two energies are not fighting, but dancing around each other. Learning from each other. Naruto considered this. So you're saying I could potentially use the gate and your chakra together? Theoretically. Kurama didn't sound thrilled by the prospect. But I'd advise caution. We don't know the limits or consequences yet. Fair enough. Naruto sat down, mirroring Kurama's posture. There's something else. I'm getting memories, fragments of Gilgamesh's life, and sometimes I feel different. Thoughts that don't seem like mine. The fox's eyes narrowed. That's concerning. The gate isn't just a collection of weapons, it's an extension of Gilgamesh himself, his legacy, his very essence as the king of heroes. In accepting it, you may have accepted more than you bargained for. You think he's trying to possess me? Not exactly. Kurama seemed to be choosing his words carefully. From what I can sense, there's no conscious entity attempting to take control. But there is an influence, a perspective. The gate itself carries Gilgamesh's values, his worldview. Using it means exposing yourself to that influence. Naruto frowned, and Gilgamesh was arrogant, tyrannical, believed absolutely in his divine right to rule. Kurama finished. At least initially. The memories you're receiving, are they all from the same period of his life? Yuto thought back to the fragments he'd experienced. No. They seem to span different times. In some, he's cruel, seeing humans as playthings. In others, he seems wiser. Sadder, maybe. Kurama's tail swished thoughtfully. Legends often simplify complex lives. Even I, who have lived for centuries, have been reduced to a demon fox in your people's stories. His massive head tilted. Perhaps Gilgamesh, like most beings, changed over the course of his life. The question is, which version of him does the gate represent? Or maybe it represents all of them, Naruto suggested. And it's up to me which aspects I adopt. Kurama snorted, but it held a note of approval. Ever the optimist, but not entirely wrong. Power takes on the character of its wielder as much as the wielder takes on aspects of the power. He fixed Naruto with a stern gaze. Just be aware of the changes in yourself. If you start thinking the village exists to serve you rather than the other way around, we're going to have a problem. Naruto grinned. I have you to keep me humble, don't I? Someone has to, the fox grumbled. Now go back to playing with your shiny new weapons. But remember, any power that destroys its previous wielder has a price. Be sure you're willing to pay it. With those ominous words, Kurama closed his eyes, effectively ending the conversation. Naruto returned to his physical senses, opening his eyes to find the clearing unchanged around him. He stood, stretching muscles that had grown stiff during his meditation. Kurama's warnings echoed in his mind, but they only strengthened his resolve. He would master this power, not be mastered by it. The sun had risen higher, filtering through the dense canopy in dappled patterns. Naruto decided to try something new. Instead of weapons, he focused on calling forth one of the many treasures he had glimpsed in the gate, items of power that weren't designed for combat. A golden portal opened before him, and from it emerged a small crystal vial filled with luminous liquid. Knowledge accompanied it. This was ambrosia, the drink of immortality from another world's pantheon. A single drop could heal any wound, restore youth, even bring back the recently deceased. Naruto studied the vial with a mixture of awe and concern. Such an item could save countless lives, or create terrible imbalance if misused. After a moment's contemplation, he returned it to the gate. Some treasures were too potent to use casually. Next, he called forth a simpler item, a cloak woven of material that seemed to shift between solid cloth and smoke. Donning it, Naruto found himself completely invisible, his presence masked even from his own senses. He removed it quickly, slightly unnerved by the experience, and sent it back. Item after item emerged from the gate as Naruto explored the non-weapon treasures. A mirror that showed distant places, a goblet that could purify any liquid, a compass that pointed not to north but to whatever the holder most desired. Each had its uses, but none felt as natural in his hands as the weapons had. Perhaps that was Gilgamesh's influence. The king of heroes had been a warrior first, a collector second. A sudden rustle in the underbrush broke Naruto's concentration. He closed the portal instantly, senses alert as he scanned the perimeter of the clearing. It could be one of the forest's many predators, but something about the sound had seemed too deliberate. Show yourself, he called, dropping into a fighting stance. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a figure stepped from the shadows beneath the trees, A woman in the distinctive armor of Anbu Black Ops, her face concealed behind a cat-like mask. Uzumaki Naruto, she said, her voice professionally neutral. Lady Hokage requests your presence immediately. Naruto relaxed slightly, though his guard remained up. Did she say why? No. The ANBU's head tilted slightly. But it may have something to do with the energy signatures that have been detected from this area. Signatures unlike any chakra we've encountered before. So much for secrecy. Naruto sighed. Tell her I'm on my way. The Anbu nodded once, then vanished in a swirl of leaves, standard body flicker technique. Naruto waited until he was sure she was gone before opening a small portal and withdrawing a simple kunai from the gate. Unlike the legendary weapons he'd been practicing with, this one appeared ordinary in every way, indistinguishable from the standard ninja tools he'd carried all his life. A test, he decided, to see if Tsunade or her sensors could detect the difference between a normal weapon and one from the gate. Tucking the kunai into his holster, Naruto headed back toward the village at a steady pace. His mind raced ahead, considering what to tell the Hokage. Complete honesty. A partial explanation. The power of the gate was beyond anything in the ninja world. How would Tsunade react to knowing such a force existed, and that it was bound to him alone? By the time he reached the Hokage Tower, Naruto had decided on a middle path. Enough truth to satisfy Tsunade's immediate concerns, but withholding the full scope of what the gate could do until he himself understood it better. The Anbu guards outside Tsunade's office admitted him without comment. Inside, he found not just the Hokage but also Shizune and, to his surprise, Shikamaru Nara, who now served as Tsunade's chief strategic advisor. Granny Tsunade. Naruto greeted her with forced casualness. You wanted to see me. Tsunade's amber eyes narrowed at the nickname, but she let it pass. 3 Sep. Or 8 sensor teams reported unusual energy spikes from Training Ground 44 this morning. Energy that, according to them, felt golden, and rippled the air itself. She leaned forward, hands clasped before her. Care to explain? Naruto met her gaze steadily. I found something in that temple. Something Kagami was after. The king's treasury? Shikamaru asked, his expression calculating. Yes, but not in the way he expected. Naruto took a deep breath. It's called the Gate of Babylon. It's a kind of storage space, I guess you could say. For weapons and other items. A storage space, Tsunade repeated flatly. That produces energy signatures our best sensors can't identify. It's not from our world, Naruto admitted. It belonged to a king named Gilgamesh, from another reality entirely. When Kagami tried to claim it, it rejected him, violently. But for some reason, it accepted me. Shikamaru's eyes widened slightly. Troublesome, he muttered. Show us, Tsunade commanded. Naruto hesitated, then nodded. He raised his hand, focusing on creating the smallest portal possible, just large enough for a single weapon. The air before him rippled with golden light, and from the portal emerged a simple sword. Its blade gleaming in the office light. Shizune gasped. Shikamaru leaned forward, fascination overcoming his usual lazy demeanor. Tsunade's expression remained carefully neutral, though her eyes tracked every detail of the phenomenon. This is one of thousands, Naruto explained, returning the sword to the gate and closing the portal. Each unique, each with its own properties and powers. And you control them all? Tsunade asked, her voice deliberately calm. I'm learning to, he replied honestly. It's not like chakra. It works on different principles. But yes, they respond to my will. A heavy silence filled the office as the 3 ninja processed this information. Finally, Tsunade sighed. I suppose it was too much to hope you'd complete one mission without street. Umbling into some reality-altering power, she said dryly. The story of your life, Naruto. Despite the tension, he couldn't help a small smile. It was true, from the 9 tails to sage mode to the powers granted during the war. His career had been a series of unexpected power-ups. The question is, Shikamaru interjected, what do we do about it? This isn't something we can keep secret forever, especially if you're planning to use it in combat. Which brings me to my next point, Tsunade said, her expression turning serious. We've received reports of unusual activity near the Land of Rivers border. A group calling themselves the Collectors has been raiding archaeological sites and ancient temples. Their leader supposedly possesses weapons that defy natural law. Naruto's blood chilled. Like the gate, perhaps not exactly the same, but similar enough to warrant investigation. Tsunade fixed him with an evaluating stare. Normally, I'd send a full squad for this kind of reconnaissance. But given the sensitive nature of what you're carrying, I think a solo mission might be more appropriate. You want me to check it out, Naruto surmised. See if they're connected to the gate somehow. And neutralize the threat if necessary, she confirmed. But primarily, gather information. If there are other powers like this out there, we need to know. Shikamaru frowned. Sending him alone is risky. If these collectors do have weapons comparable to what Naruto just showed us. I'll be fine, Naruto interrupted. Actually, I think this is perfect. I need space to practice with the gate anyway. And a solo mission away from the village gives me that opportunity. Tsunade nodded, having clearly anticipated this response. You'll leave tomorrow at dawn. Shikamaru will brief you on what little intelligence we have on the collectors. She stood, signaling the end of the meeting. And Naruto, be careful. Not just with the enemy, but with this power. Nothing comes without a price. That's what Kurama said too. Naruto admitted. The Nine Tails is concerned. Shizune spoke up for the first time, worry evident in her voice. Cautious, Naruto clarified. The gate is interfacing with my chakra network, including his. He's not sure what the long-term effects might be. All the more reason for discretion, Tsunade said firmly. Until we understand this power better, knowledge of it stays in this room. She glanced at Shikamaru and Shizune, who both nodded their agreement. As Naruto turned to leave, Tsunade added, and Naruto, no showing off at Ino's party tonight. The last thing we need is the entire village gossiping about golden portals and magical weapons. He grinned. I'll behave, I promise. The smile faded as he left the tower. Another mission, another mystery. But this time, he carried a power that even he didn't fully understand, a power that might have found its way into other hands as well. The collectors. The name itself suggested they sought items of power. Artifacts from forgotten ages. Had they somehow learned about the gate? Or did they possess something different but equally dangerous? Either way, Naruto had a feeling the peaceful interlude following the war was coming to an end. A new kind of battle was brewing. One fought not with chakra, but with weapons and powers from beyond their world. And he, once again, stood at the center of the coming storm. Ichiraku Ramen had expanded considerably since Naruto's childhood, growing from a humble stand to a proper restaurant that could accommodate dozens of customers. Tonight, the NT place had been reserved for Ino's birthday celebration, and it seemed half the village had turned out for the occasion. Naruto arrived to find the party in full swing. Colorful lanterns hung from the ceiling. Music played from speakers in the corners, and the tables had been pushed to the sides to create a space for mingling in the center. The rich aroma of Chuki's signature broths filled the air, complemented by the scent of sake and beer. Naruto, Ino called, waving from where she held court amid a group of admirers. The Yamanaka heir had grown into her confidence, becoming not only one of Konoha's top intelligence operatives but also a social nexus for the village's younger generation. Her long blonde hair was elaborately styled for the occasion, and she wore a purple dress that nagged to be both elegant and eye-catching. He made his way through the crowd, accepting a cup of sake from Shoji as he passed. "Happy birthday, Ino," he said, giving her a quick hug. "Sorry I'm late. Got caught up in mission prep." "Mission prep? You just got back," Ino protested. "Tsunade-sama works you too hard." "It's fine," he assured her. "Just a quick reconnaissance thing. Nothing major." A familiar voice spoke from behind him. "Nothing major usually means extremely dangerous when it comes to you." Naruto turned to find Hinata Hyuga standing there, a small smile on her face. Her dark hair fell loose around her shoulders, contrasting with the pale lavender of her eyes and the simple white dress she wore. "Hinata," he grinned. "When did you get back from the Land of Iron?" "Yesterday," she replied. "The diplomatic mission took longer than expected. Their samurai generals are deliberate in their decision-making." "She means stubborn," Kiba interjected, joining them with a plate piled high with food. "Hinata's just too polite to say it." The conversation flowed easily as more of their friends gathered around. Naruto found himself relaxing for the first time since the temple incident. Here, surrounded by people who had fought alongside him, laughed with him, grown up with him, the strange new power he carried seemed distant and abstract. That is, until Tenten approached. "Naruto," she greeted him. Her expression curious. "I heard something interesting today. One of my contacts in the weapons trade mentioned sensing strange disturbances from the Forest of Death this morning. Something about weapons with auras unlike any chakra blade." Her eyes, sharp as the many weapons she wielded, studied him intently. "Anything you want to share?" Naruto felt a prickle of unease. Tenten had developed a reputation as Konoha's foremost weapons specialist, maintaining a network of contacts across the 5 great nations who kept her informed about rare and unusual armaments. If anyone would notice something like the gate, it would be her. "Just some new technique I've been working on," he replied, keeping his tone casual. Nothing special. She clearly didn't believe him, but before she could press further, Sakura joined their circle, providing a welcome distraction. "I can't believe you're leaving on another mission already," his pink-haired teammate complained. "You just got back. Duty calls," Naruto said with a shrug. "Besides, it's just reconnaissance. I'll be back before you know it." The conversation shifted to lighter topics after that: village gossip, memories of past missions, plans for the future. But Naruto noticed Tenten watching him throughout the evening, her expression thoughtful. As the night wore on, he found himself drifting to the edge of the party, nursing a cup of sake and watching his friends with a strange sense of distance. The fragmentary memories of Gilgamesh surfaced occasionally, the king looking down upon his subjects from the ziggurat of Uruk, separate and above even while among them. "Not like you to be the wallflower," Shikamaru observed, joining him in his quiet corner. "Usually you're the life of the party." Naruto smiled faintly. "Just thinking about tomorrow's mission." Shikamaru took a long drink from his cup before speaking again. "I've been analyzing what little we know about the collectors. They appeared about 6 months ago. Initially just buying artifacts from legitimate dealers. Then they started raiding dig sites, temples, anywhere with items of potential power. Any pattern to what they're taking? That's the interesting part," Shikamaru said, lowering his voice. "They seem particularly interested in artifacts that have counterparts in other cultures. Items that appear in multiple mythologies under different names." Naruto frowned. "Like what? Swords that can cut anything? Shields that render the bearer invulnerable? Spears that always hit their target?" Shikamaru gave him a significant look. "Sound familiar?" "The original forms," Naruto murmured, remembering the knowledge that had come with the gate. Gilgamesh collected the original versions of legendary weapons, from which all later myths derived. "Exactly. These collectors may be trying to assemble their own version of your gate, piece by piece." Shikamaru's expression grew serious. "Their leader calls himself Casimir. No last name, no known village affiliation. Descriptions vary, but all agree he possesses weapons of unusual power." "Any idea where they came from?" "The weapons, I mean." "None." Shikamaru shook his head. "But given what happened to you, I'm guessing another temple, another gateway to wherever Gilgamesh's treasury exists." The implications were troubling. If the collectors had access to even a fraction of the gate's power, they could pose a significant threat. "The mission briefing packet has their last known location and movement patterns," Shikamaru continued. "I've outlined several possible approaches, depending on whether you want to observe from a distance or attempt infiltration." "Thanks, Shikamaru." Naruto's appreciation was genuine. Despite the lazy demeanor, his friend's strategic mind was unmatched. Their conversation was interrupted by a commotion near the center of the restaurant. Kiba had challenged Rock Lee to a drinking contest, always a dangerous proposition given Lee's notorious sensitivity to alcohol. "I should probably intervene before Lee destroys the place," Shikamaru sighed, setting down his cup. "Try to enjoy the rest of the party. Whatever's waiting for you tomorrow, it'll still be there." As Shikamaru moved to break up the impending disaster, Naruto felt someone else approach. He turned to find Hinata standing beside him, her expression concerned. "Is everything all right?" she asked softly. "You seem troubled." Naruto considered deflecting with his usual cheerful assurance, but something in Hinata's genuine concern gave him pause. Of all his friends, She had always been the most perceptive of his moods, the most attuned to the feelings he tried to hide. Just thinking about how quickly things change, he admitted. One mission, one moment, and suddenly everything's different. Hinata nodded, understanding in her pale eyes. Like when you faced pain. Or during the war, when you connected with all of us through the Nine Tails chakra. Yeah, like that, he smiled faintly. Moments that change everything. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching their friends. Lee had indeed had a sip of sake and was now performing an inkriya. Singly acrobatic dance while Tenten and Neji tried to corral him away from the breakable items. Whatever it is, Hinata said finally, whatever's changed, you don't have to face it alone. Her voice was quiet but firm. None of us does, not anymore. The simple statement struck Naruto deeply. It was true. Through all the challenges they'd faced, they'd learned the power of standing together, of supporting one another. Even Kurama, once a solitary being of rage, had found connection. Perhaps that was the difference between him and Gilgamesh. The king of heroes had stood alone, above all others. Until the loss of his only friend had taught him the value of human connection. Naruto had begun with nothing, alone and ostracized, and had built connections that now formed the core of his strength. Thank you, Hinata, he said. Meaning it. I'll remember that. She smiled, a faint blush coloring her cheeks. I should go help with Lee before he breaks something irreplaceable. As she moved away, Naruto felt a renewed sense of purpose. Whatever the collectors were planning, whatever challenges the gate might bring, he wouldn't face them as Gilgamesh had, alone and arrogant. He would face them as himself, with the strength of his bonds supporting him. The party continued around him, his precious people laughing and living in the moment. Tomorrow would bring new dangers, new mysteries. But tonight, in this expanded ramen shop that had been his first real home, Naruto allowed himself to simply be. Not the Jinchuriki, not the hero of the war, not the new wielder of an ancient power, but just Naruto, surrounded by friends. And for now, that was enough. Chapter 1 End. Chapter 2. Chains of Heaven. Dawn painted the eastern sky in hues of amber and gold as Naruto slipped through Konoha's gates. The early hour meant few witnesses to his departure, exactly as planned. Tsunade had emphasized discretion for this mission, and for once, Naruto was inclined to agree. The less attention drawn to his activities, the better. The land of rivers lay 3 days' journey southwest of Konoha, a narrow country defined by the waterways that gave it its name. According to Shikamaru's intelligence, the collectors had established a base somewhere in the region's northern mountains, using the labyrinthine river valleys to mask their movements. Naruto traveled light, a small pack containing rations, basic medical supplies. And the mission briefing. He wore standard-issue ninja gear rather than his distinctive orange outfit, another concession to stealth. The only unusual item he carried was the kun. He'd withdrawn from the gate the previous day, tucked into a special holster at his hip. As the village disappeared behind him, Naruto increased his pace, leaping from tree to tree with practiced ease. The land of fire's dense forests provided excellent cover, and he planned to make the most of the terrain while it lasted. By midday, he had covered nearly twice the distance a normal ninja might have managed. The Nine Tails chakra had always granted him exceptional stamina, but he noticed something new today, a different kind of energy supplementing his own, flowing through pathways that made to parallel his chakra network without quite touching it. The gate's power, adapting to his body just as Kurama had said. Naruto paused on a high branch, taking a moment to examine this new sensation. He closed his eyes, focusing inward as he'd been taught during his sage training. The familiar blue of his chakra flowed through its established channels, alongside the more volatile red of Kurama's power. But now there was something else. Threads of gold weaving between the blue and red, sometimes touching, sometimes separate, creating a complex lattice of energy. Interesting, he murmured, opening his eyes. On impulse, he opened a small portal beside him, calling forth one of the simplest weapons in the gate, a plain short sword with a bronze blade, ancient in design but perfectly preserved. Unlike his previous experiments, this time he paid close attention to how the energy flowed from him to the gate and back. The golden threads in his system brightened momentarily, pulsing as the portal opened. There was no drain on his chakra, but he felt something else diminish slightly, not physical energy, but something more abstract. Will, perhaps, or intent. Naruto returned the sword and closed the portal. Considering the implications, if the gate drew on a different energy source than chakra, he could potentially use both simultaneously without one limiting the other. The tactical advantages were obvious, but so were the dangers of overextending himself on two fronts. He resumed his journey, mind working through various combat scenarios, strategies for integrating his existing techniques with the gate's capabilities. By the time he stopped for the night, making camp in a small cave beside a stream, he had developed several promising combinations to test when opportunity allowed. As he prepared a simple meal of field rations, Naruto sensed a presence approaching, not hostile, but deliberately stealthy. He continued his preparations, giving no sign that he'd detected the observer. While positioning himself to respond instantly if needed. "You can come out," he called after a few minutes of this charade. "I know you're there." A moment of silence followed, then a figure dropped from the trees at the edge of his camp, a woman in standard Konoha combat gear, her brown hair gathered into two buns atop her head. "Tenten." Naruto stared in disbelief. "What are you doing here?" She straightened, adjusting the large scroll strapped to her back. "Following you, obviously. I can see that," he replied, exasperation creeping into his voice. "Why?" Tenten approached the fire, dropping her pack beside it and sitting down without waiting for an invitation. "Because you're hiding something interesting, and I want to know what it is." "I'm on a solo mission," Naruto said firmly. "Classified. You need to return to the village. Already sent a message to Tsunade-sama explaining I'm joining you." Tenten pulled out her own ration pack with the casualness of someone who knew they wouldn't be sent away. "She'll probably be angry, but she won't recall me. Not when I'm already this far out." Naruto sighed, recognizing the truth in her words. Tenten could be remarkably stubborn when her curiosity was piqued, especially where weapons were concerned. "How did you even know I was leaving?" he asked, resigned to her company. "Please." She rolled her eyes. "The way you and Shikamaru were whispering at the party. The fact that you left without telling anyone goodbye. And most tellingly, the energy signature you left in the forest of death yesterday." Her expression grew serious. Every weapons specialist in the village felt that, Naruto. It wasn't chakra. At least, not entirely. Naruto studied her for a long moment. Tenten had always been the most weapons-focused of their generation, dedicating herself to mastering every bladed, pointed, and blunt instrument she could find. If anyone could potentially understand the Gate of Babylon, it might be her. Still, Tsunade's warnings about discretion echoed in his mind. "It's complicated," he hedged, "and potentially dangerous, which is exactly why you shouldn't be handling it alone," she countered. "Look, I'm not asking for state secrets. But if you're tracking weapons traffickers while carrying some new weapon system yourself, having a weapons specialist along makes tactical sense." Put that way, her logic was difficult to refute. And truthfully, Naruto wasn't entirely comfortable with the solitary nature of his mission. Having a trusted comrade watching his back would be welcome, especially one with Tenten's specific expertise. "All right," he conceded, "but this stays between us for now." She nodded, satisfaction evident in her expression. "Of course, I mean it, Tenten. What I'm about to show you." Tsunade classified it as an S-rank secret. That gave her pause. S-rank secrecy was reserved for information that could potentially shift the balance of power between nations if revealed. Her expression sobered. "I understand," she said with genuine gravity. "I won't betray your trust." Satisfied with her sincerity, Naruto stood, moving to a more open area away from the fire. "What I'm about to show you came from an ancient temple I discovered on my last mission. It's called the Gate of Babylon." Without further preamble, he opened a portal, larger than the ones he'd practiced with earlier, about a meter in diameter. The golden ripple in the air cast its light across Tenten's astonished face as she scrambled to her feet. "It's a dimensional treasury," Naruto explained as Tenten approached the portal cautiously. "It contains weapons. Thousands of them. Every weapon ever created, according to the knowledge that came with it." "Every weapon," Tenten whispered, eyes wide with wonder. She reached toward the portal, then stopped, glancing at Naruto for permission. "You can't reach in," he clarified. "Only I can call the weapons forth or return them." To demonstrate, he summoned Durandal, Th. E-sword materializing from the golden void and floating before them. The blade gleamed in the firelight, the runes along its length shifting subtly as if alive. Tenten's breath caught. I've never seen craftsmanship like that. Her expert eye traced the sword's lines with naked admiration. The balance must be perfect. It is, Naruto confirmed, taking the sword in hand. This is Durandal, according to the gate's knowledge. It once cut through a mountain to create a pass between two kingdoms. May I? Tenten held out her hands, professional interest overcoming her awe. Naruto hesitated, then carefully handed her the legendary blade. Tenten took it with the reverence of a true weapons master, testing its weight, examining the edge with a practiced eye. It's impossibly sharp, she murmured. And the metal, I've never seen anything like it. It's not chakra steel, not any alloy I'm familiar with. She performed a simple kata with the blade, its passage through the air producing a distinctive humming tone. Perfect harmony. Absolutely perfect. Naruto watched her assessment with interest. Having Tenten's expert opinion confirmed what he'd felt intuitively, these weapons beyond anything their world had produced. Where did it come from? She asked, reluctantly returning the sword to him. You mentioned a temple. Yes, but the weapons themselves come from another world entirely. Naruto returned Durandal to the gate and closed the portal, the golden light fading from their small camp. They belong to a king named Gilgamesh, who collected the original versions of every treasure humanity ever created. He explained about the temple, Kagami's obsession, and how the gate had rejected the missing nin but accepted Naruto. He described the fragmentary memories, the different energy the gate used, and the mission to investigate the collectors who might possess similar artifacts. Tenten listened intently, asking occasional questions that revealed her sharp and extensive knowledge of legendary weapons from their own world's history. So these collectors, she said when he'd finished. You think they might have access to the same treasury? Or something similar? That's what we need to find out, Naruto replied. According to Shikamaru's intelligence, they've been gathering artifacts that match descriptions of weapons in the gate. Tenten's eyes lit with understanding. That's why you need a weapons specialist. I can help identify what they've collected, maybe determine if they're genuine articles from this gate or just similar items from our world. Exactly. Naruto nodded, glad she'd grasped the mission parameters so quickly. Our primary objective is reconnaissance. Identify what the collectors have, determine if they're a threat, and report back to Tsunade. And if they are a threat? Tenten asked, her expression turning serious. Naruto's face hardened. Then we neutralize them before they can use these weapons against Konoha or our allies. They spent the next hour developing strategies, with Tenten offering insights about how traditional weapons might fare against the gate's treasures. Her encyclopedic knowledge proved invaluable as they discussed countermeasures and tactical approaches. The key advantage you have, she noted, is versatility. Most weapon specialists, myself included, are limited by what we can physically carry. But you can access anything in the gate instantly, adapting to any situation. True, Naruto agreed, but I'm still learning what's available. There are thousands of weapons in there, each with its own properties and abilities. It's like having access to every jutsu ever created, but not knowing which hand signs to use. Then we should catalog what you do know, Tenten suggested practically. Make a list of the weapons you've identified so far, their capabilities, and optimal uses. They worked on this task until late in the night, creating a basic reference system that Naruto could expand as he discovered more about the gate's contents. By the time they turned in for the night, Naruto felt considerably more confident about both the mission and his ability to control his new power. As he drifted towards sleep, he realized that Tenten's presence had provided something he hadn't known he needed, not just tactical support, but a grounding influence, someone who understood weapons as tools rather than mere instruments of power. Her practical approach helped counterbalance the more imperial perspective that sometimes crept into his thoughts from Gilgamesh's memories. Perhaps Hinata had been right. Facing this alone wasn't the answer. The terrain changed dramatically as they crossed into the land of rivers on the third day of their journey. Lush forests gave way to steep sea anyons carved by centuries of flowing water, creating a maze-like landscape of narrow valleys and towering cliffs. Vegetation clung tenaciously to rock faces, and the constant sound of rushing water echoed through the gorges. Perfect place for a hideout, Tenten observed as they paused on a ridge overlooking a particularly complex network of ravines. Natural barriers, limited approaches, multiple escape routes via the rivers. Naruto nodded, consulting the map Shikamaru had provided. According to intelligence, the collectors were last seen operating in this region. He pointed to an area where several canyons converged around a central plateau. Local villages reported strange lights and sounds from that direction about a week ago. Strange how? Tenten asked, sharpening a kunai as they talked. Colors not found in nature. Sounds like metal striking metal, but amplified to impossible volumes. Naruto rolled up the map. Sounds like someone testing weapons to me. Agreed. Tenten returned the kunai to her pouch. How do you want to approach? Direct reconnaissance or infiltration? Naruto considered their options. Let's start with long-range observation. I can send Shadow Clone S to scout the perimeter while we establish a hidden position with good sightlines. With the plan agreed, they descended into the canyon system, moving cautiously and erasing signs of their passage. The area showed increasing evidence of human activity as they approached the plateau: broken branches, disturbed earth, even the occasional discarded supply wrapper. Not very careful, are they? Tenten whispered as they examined a clearly used path. They don't think they need to be, Naruto replied grimly. If they have weapons from the gate, they might feel invulnerable. They established a concealed observation post on a ledge overlooking the plateau, about half a kilometer from what appeared to be the main encampment. Naruto created a dozen shadow clones, sending them to circle the area at varying distances while he and Tenten settled into watch. What they saw confirmed their suspicions. The collectors had established a substantial base on the plateau, a mixture of semi-permanent street structures and tents arranged around a central pavilion. Men and women in practical clothing moved purposefully between buildings, carrying crates and scrolls. Armed guards patrolled the perimeter. They are weapons conventional, but their alertness suggesting professional training. I count at least 30 personnel, Tenten murmured, observing through a small telescope. Mostly support staff, looks like. Maybe a dozen actual fighters. Any sign of unusual weapons? Naruto asked, focusing on the central pavilion where activity seemed most concentrated. Not yet. They're keeping the important items inside, probably. As the day progressed, Naruto's shadow clones reported back, each dispelling to transfer its gathered intelligence directly to his mind. A complete picture of the operation began to form: supply routes, guard rotations, a rough understanding of the camp's hierarchy. Most importantly, they confirmed the presence of artifacts being studied in the central pavilion. One clone had managed to glimpse inside, reporting seeing pedestals with weapons of unusual design under intense examination. By nightfall, they had enough information to risk a closer approach. Under cover of darkness, Naruto and Tenten moved to a new position just outside the camp's perimeter, concealing themselves in a small hollow beneath the roots of a massive tree that clung to the canyon wall. The guard rotation changes at midnight, Naruto whispered, recalling his clone's observations. There's a 10-minute window where the northwest section is minimally monitored. That's our window then, Tenten agreed. Objective: visual confirmation of the artifacts, assessment of their nature, identification of leadership if possible. They waited, tension building as midnight approached. Naruto found himself unusually calm. A strange sense of anticipation rather than anxiety filling him. Part of that, he recognized, came from Gilgamesh's influence. The king had relished challenges worthy of his attention. At precisely midnight, they moved. Slipping past the outer perimeter was trivial for two ninja of their caliber. Using short bursts of speed between patches of shadow, they approached the central pavilion, a large tent structure with sides that could be rolled up during the day but were now securely fastened for the night. A single guard stood at the entrance, alert but unaware of their presence in the darkness nearby. Tenten produced a needle-thin senbon from her sleeve, aiming with practiced precision. The dart struck the guard's neck at exactly the right point, and he slumped silently to the ground, unconscious but unharmed. They dragged him into the shadows, then Naruto created a transformation clone to take his place while they slipped inside the pavilion. The interior was dimly lit by a few lanterns, providing just enough illumination to navigate without bumping into the numerous tables and display cases arranged throughout the space. Tenten moved immediately to examine the artifacts, while Naruto sought information about the collector's leadership and plans. Naruto, Tenten whispered urgently after a few minutes. You need to see this. He joined her beside a central display where a single weapon rested on a velvet cushion, a dagger with a blade that seemed to shift between solid metal and something more ethereal, its edge blurring as if it existed in multiple places simultaneously. It's from the gate, he confirmed in a hushed voice, recognizing it instantly from the knowledge that had come to him. Karnwenin, the dagger that could shroud its wielder in shadow. They have more. Tenten gestured to other displays. Not many, but each one is significant. Naruto moved around the pavilion, identifying each artifact with growing concern. A bow that could fire arrows of pure light. A hammer that returned to the wielder's hand when thrown. A shield that supposedly rendered its bearer invulnerable to projectiles. Perhaps a dozen items in total, a mere fraction of the gate's contents. But formidable weapons nonetheless. Meanwhile, Tenten had discovered a ledger containing detailed notes on each artifact, where it had been found, its properties as understood by the collectors. Potential uses in combat. They're methodical, she murmured, flipping through the pages. Testing each weapon's capabilities, documenting limitations. This isn't random collection, they're building an arsenal. Naruto found another document, this one containing maps marked with locations across the elemental nations. They're targeting specific sites, he realized. Ancient temples, ruins, places where the boundaries between worlds might be thinner. Looking for more access points to the gate, Tenten suggested, or something similar. Naruto studied the map intently, memorizing the locations. There's a pattern here, but I can't quite. He froze as a new presence registered at the edge of his senses, powerful, controlled, and rapidly approaching the pavilion. Someone's coming, he whispered. Someone strong. They had barely enough time to conceal themselves behind a large display case when the pavilion entrance opened. Naruto's transformation clone had vanished, dispelled or discovered. There was no way to know. A tall figure entered, moving with the fluid grace of a master combatant. In the dim light, details were difficult to discern, but the newcomer appeared to be a man in his late 30s. With shoulder-length silver hair and clothing of foreign design, a high-collared coat over fitted armor, all in muted blues and grays. I know you're here, the man said calmly, his voice carrying a slight accent Naruto couldn't place. You might as well show yourselves. My sentries detected your chakra signatures the moment you entered the camp. Naruto and Tenten exchanged glances. Their cover blown, they had limited options: attempt to flee, potentially triggering a camp-wide alarm, or confront this individual directly and attempt to gather more intelligence in the process. Naruto made the decision, stepping out from behind the display with Tenten following his lead a moment later. Konoha ninja, the man observed, showing no surprise. I was wondering when the hidden villages would take an interest in our activities. His pale eyes studied them with clinical detachment. Though I must admit, I expected a larger force. Were enough, Naruto replied, subtly shifting his stance to a more defensive position. Who are you, and what is your interest in these weapons? The man smiled slightly. Directness. How refreshing. He inclined his head in a gesture that was almost a bow. I am Casimir, scholar, collector, and custodian of artifacts too powerful for casual handling. His gaze sharpened. And you are Naruto Uzumaki, hero of the Fourth Great Ninja War. Your reputation precedes you. Naruto kept his expression neutral, though inwardly he was surprised to be recognized so easily. You didn't answer my second question. My interest. Casimir moved to the central display, running his fingers along the edge of the case without quite touching the dagger within. I study them, preserve them, ensure they don't fall into hands that would misuse their power. His pale eyes fixed on Naruto again. Much as you do with the Nine Tails, I understand. The comparison was unexpected, throwing Naruto momentarily off balance. Before he could respond, Casimir continued. But perhaps we should speak more comfortably. He gestured to a small seating area at the back of the pavilion. I have tea prepared at all hours. We are, after all, civilly Zed people engaged in a common pursuit of knowledge. Common pursuit? Tenten asked skeptically. You've been raiding archaeological sites across 3 countries. Retrieving artifacts that were being disturbed by less careful hands, Casimir corrected mildly. The choice was to let them be scattered to private collections, or gather them where they could be properly studied and protected. He moved toward the seating area. Please, I rarely have the opportunity to discuss these matters with individuals who might actually understand their significance. Against his better judgment, Naruto found himself intrigued. This was not the power-hungry villain he had expected to find. Casimir spoke with the measured cadence of a scholar, and his chakra, while potent, showed none of the volume. Tile patterns associated with aggression or deception. All right, Naruto decided, nodding to Tenten. A brief conversation. They followed Casimir to the seating area, maintaining a cautious distance. The man poured tea from an ornate pot into 3 cups, his movements precise and deliberate. You recognize these artifacts, Casimir stated rather than asked, handing them each a cup. You know their origin. Naruto accepted the tea but didn't drink. What makes you say that? Your eyes. Casimir smiled faintly. When you looked at Karnwenin, there was recognition, not curiosity. You've seen its like before. He settled into his chair, entirely at ease despite the tension. Tell me, how did you come to know of the king's treasury? The direct question confirmed Naruto's suspicions. Casimir knew about the Gate of Babylon. The question was how much he knew, and how he had acquired that knowledge. I could ask you the same, Naruto countered. Casimir nodded, accepting the deflection. Fair enough. I encountered my first artifact from the treasury 15 years ago, in ruins far to the west of the elemental nations. A simple goblet that purified any liquid poured into it. He sipped his tea. It took me 5 more years and 3 more artifacts to piece together their common origin, a dimensional vault containing the prototypes of all human creation, collected by a king from another world. Gilgamesh, Naruto said, testing Casimir's knowledge, the king of heroes himself. Casimir's eyes lit with scholarly enthusiasm. Half god, half human, ruler of Uruk, collector of treasures, seeker of immortality. His legend exists in fragments even in our world, though few recognize it for what it is. And you've been collecting pieces of his treasury, Tenten observed, gesturing to the displayed weapons. To what end? Initially, preservation and study. These artifacts don't belong in our reality. They operate on different principles, respond to different energies. Casimir set down his cup. But recently, my purpose has evolved. Tell me, Naruto Uzumaki, have you experienced dreams? Visions of a golden city? Memories that are not your own? The question struck uncomfortably close to home. Naruto maintained his composure, but something must have shown in his expression, for Casimir nodded as if confirming a theory. I thought as much. The artifacts are resonating, calling to each other. Something is changing in the barriers between worlds. His voice took on a note of urgency. The treasury is becoming more accessible, but so are other things, darker things from the same reality. What things? Naruto asked, growing increasingly uneasy. Gods, monsters, beings of power that make your tailed beasts seem like household pets. Casimir leaned forward. Gilgamesh fought such entities in his time. Some he defeated, some he merely banished. But as the barriers thin, they sense the treasury's presence in our world. They hunger for the power it represents. And you thin. Collecting these weapons will help you fight these beings? Tenten asked skeptically. I know it will, Casimir replied with absolute conviction. Because it's happened before. The cycle repeats. The treasury manifests. The hunters follow. Battle ensues. He fixed his gaze on Naruto. But this time is different. This time, the treasury has chosen a wielder. The statement hung in the air between them, its implications clear. Somehow, Casimir knew that Naruto had connected to the gate itself, not merely found isolated artifacts from it. What do you want? Naruto asked directly, abandoning pretense. Alliance. Casimir replied without hesitation. Pooling of knowledge and resources. I have spent 15 years studying these weapons, their properties, their histories. You have a direct connection to the treasury itself, but lack understanding of its full potential. He spread his hands. Together, we could prepare for what's coming. And what exactly is coming? Tenten pressed. War, Casimir said simply. Not between nations, but between realities. The barriers are weakening. Within months, the first incursions will begin. Within a year, he shook his head. Your hidden villages, your cage, your conventional weapons and jutsu, none of it will matter against what waits on the other side. Naruto exchanged glances with Tenten, seeing his own uncertainty reflected in her eyes. Casimir's warnings aligned too closely with the fragmented knowledge Naruto had received from the gate to be dismissed entirely. Yet instinct cautioned against immediate trust. "You've given us much to consider," Naruto said finally. "But we need to verify your claims independently." "Of course." Casimir reached into his coat, producing a small scroll which he offered to Naruto. "Coordinates of the next likely incursion point. Based on my calculations, in 3 days' time, the barrier will thin enough that you'll be able to sense it yourself." He smiled faintly. "Consider it a gesture of good faith." Naruto accepted the scroll cautiously. "And in return, nothing yet. Merely observe, confirm my warnings are valid." Casimir stood, signaling the end of their conversation. "When you're ready to discuss alliance, you'll find me easily enough. The treasury calls to itself. Your gate will lead you to my artifacts, just as they led me to you." He moved toward the pavilion entrance, then paused. "One piece of advice, freely given. The chains, Enkidu. Call them forth when you return to Konoha. They have particular significance to your situation." With that cryptic statement, Casimir left the pavilion, making no move to detain them or sound an alarm. "Well, that was unexpected," Tenten murmured once they were alone. "He practically invited us to leave with his information. Which makes me trust it even less," Naruto replied, tucking the scroll away. "But we can't ignore the possibility that he's telling the truth, at least partially." They slipped out of the camp as quietly as they had entered, retreating to the safety of the canyon system before stopping to discuss what they'd learned. "What do you make of him?" Naruto asked once they were secure in a hidden alcove several kilometers from the collector's base. Tenten considered the question carefully. "Intelligent, controlled, absolutely convinced of his own theories." She frowned. "But I'm not sure about his motivations. That talk of protecting artifacts from misuse, it seemed genuine, but also practiced, like a justification he's repeated many times." "I noticed that too," Naruto agreed. "And he knows too much. About the gate, about me specifically. He was waiting for someone like me to appear." "What about his warnings? The thinning barriers, entities from Gilgamesh's world crossing over?" Naruto closed his eyes, searching the fragments of knowledge he'd received from the gate. "There are impressions, memories of Gilgamesh fighting beings of immense power. Some felt like gods, others like monsters from nightmare." He opened his eyes. "But nothing specific about cyclical incursions or weakening barriers between worlds. So either he knows something you don't, or he's fabricating threats to manipulate you," Tenten concluded. "Or some combination of both." Naruto removed the scroll Casimir had given them, examining it without opening it. "We should check these coordinates, but carefully. If it's a trap, I want to be prepared. And if it's not," Tenten asked, "if he's telling the truth about incursions, then we report back to Tsunade immediately and prepare Konoha for threats unlike anything we've faced before." Naruto's expression hardened. "Either way, I'm not forming an alliance with Casimir until I understand his true agenda." They spent the remainder of the night planning their approach to the coordinates Casimir had provided. According to the scroll, the location was a remote temple complex in the mountains bordering the land of Earth, about 2 days' journey from their current position if they pushed themselves. As dawn broke, they set out, following the twisting river valleys northward. The terrain grew increasingly rugged, the canyons giving way to foothills that rose steeply toward the mountain range marking Earth Country's border. "This is disputed territory," Tenten noted as they paused atop a ridge around midday. "Neither Fire nor Earth claims it officially, but both patrol it. Which makes it perfect for clandestine operations," Naruto observed. "No clear jurisdiction, minimal civilian presence." They continued their journey, moving more cautiously as they entered the politically sensitive region. By nightfall, they had reached the lower slopes of the mountains, making camp in a sheltered ravine with good sightlines of the approaches. As Tenten prepared a small, smokeless fire, Naruto found himself drawn to Casimir's parting advice about the chains, Enkidu. He had summoned them briefly during his training sessions, but hadn't explored their full capabilities. Stepping away from the camp, he opened a portal and called forth the golden chains. They emerged with that distinctive sound. Not quite laughter, not quite music, coiling in the air before him like living things. In the fading light, they seemed to glow with an inner radiance. Enkidu, he murmured, remembering the fragments he'd received. The chains that bound the bull of heaven. But there was more to them than that. Enkidu had been the name of Gilgamesh's closest friend, a being created by the gods to counter the king's arrogance, who instead became his only equal, his truest companion. When Enkidu died, Gilgamesh had faced his own mortality for the first time, beginning his quest for immortality. These chains were named for that friend, designed to bind divine beings just as Enkidu the friend had bound Gilgamesh to his humanity. On impulse, Naruto directed the chains toward himself. They responded instantly, wrapping around his arms and torso, not constricting, but embracing, like a friend's touch. The moment they made contact, something shifted within him. The chaotic fragments of Gilgamesh's memories suddenly aligned, no longer random flashes but a coherent narrative. Naruto saw the king's life with new clarity, his early tyranny, his friendship with Enkidu, his grief and subsequent journey, his eventual wisdom and acceptance of mortality. The arrogance remained, but tempered by hard-won understanding of human connection and loss. More importantly, Naruto felt the distinction between these memories and his own thoughts sharpen. Where before there had been occasional blurring, moments where Gilgamesh's imperial perspective colored his thinking, now there was clear separation, the king's experiences accessible but no longer infiltrating his own identity. The chains bind divinity, Naruto whispered in understanding, including Gilgamesh's divine aspect in the gate. He released the chains, sending them back into the portal, but the effect remained, clarity, separation. A stronger sense of his own identity alongside but distinct from the king's memories. Returning to camp, Naruto found Tenten examining one of her scrolls by firelight. "Everything okay?" she asked, noting his thoughtful expression. "Better than okay," he replied, sitting across from her. "I think I just understood what Casimir meant about the chains. They help control the gate's influence." He explained what had happened, watching understanding dawn in her eyes. "So the gate was affecting your thinking," she said, subtly pushing you toward Gilgamesh's perspective. "Not controlling me," Naruto clarified. "More like, suggesting, coloring my thoughts in ways I didn't always recognize." He smiled ruefully. "I'm actually grateful for Casimir's advice, though I'm still not sure why he gave it." "Perhaps he wants you clear-headed for whatever we find tomorrow," Tenten suggested. "If these incursions are real, you'll need your wits about you, not confused by another king's memories. Or perhaps he has another agenda entirely." Naruto stared into the fire. "We'll find out soon enough." They reached the coordinates shortly before noon the following day. The temple complex, sprawled across a mountainside clearing, its ancient stones weathered by centuries of exposure. Unlike the hidden temple where Naruto had discovered the gate, this one remained partially above ground. A series of interconnected buildings surrounding a central courtyard, all constructed of the same gray-green stone that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. No signs of recent activity, Enten observed as they surveyed the site from a concealed position in the tree line. No guards, no equipment, nothing to suggest Casimir or his collectors have been here. "But something's not right," Naruto murmured, extending his senses. "The air feels thin, like there's less of it somehow." "But something's not right," Naruto murmured, extending his senses. "The air feels thin, like there's less of it somehow." Now that they had arrived, Naruto could indeed feel what Casimir had described, a thinning of reality itself. It wasn't visible to the naked eye, but his heightened senses, particularly those connected to the gate, detected a subtle wrongness centered on the temple courtyard. "I feel it too," Tenten said, surprising him. "Not clearly, but it's like the pressure changes just before a major storm." They continued their observation for another hour, noting the temple's layout and possible approaches. No wildlife ventured near the structures, no birds flew overhead, no insects buzzed in the underbrush surrounding the clearing. The absence created an unnatural silence that only heightened their unease. According to Casimir's scroll, the incursion should begin at sundown, Naruto said finally. "We should move closer, find a concealed position within the complex itself." Tenten nodded, readying her weapons. "Lead the way." They approached cautiously, leapfrogging Rom cover to cover until they reached the crumbling outer wall of the temple. Up close, The stonework revealed intricate carvings, scenes of battle between human figures and larger, more monstrous entities. The craftsmanship was exquisite despite its age, each figure rendered with lifelike detail. "These don't match any historical style I'm familiar with," Tenten whispered, tracing a carving with her fingertips. "They're not from our world, are they?" "No," Naruto confirmed, recognizing elements from Gilgamesh's memories. "They're depicting battles from his world, humans fighting alongside divine beings against monsters from the primordial void." They made their way deeper into the complex, eventually finding an ideal observation point, a partially collapsed second story overlooking the center courtyard while providing multiple escape routes if needed. As they settled in to wait for sundown, Naruto prepared himself mentally, reviewing the weapons he might need to call upon if Casimir's warnings proved accurate. The sun began its descent, shadows lengthening across the courtyard as afternoon turned to evening. The thinning sensation intensified gradually, becoming almost physically uncomfortable as twilight approached. A pressure behind the eyes, a subtle distortion of perspective that made distances seem inconsistent. "Something's happening," Tenten whispered, unnecessarily. The air in the center of the courtyard had begun to shimmer, not unlike the effect of heat rising from sun-baked stone, except the temperature was dropping rapidly, their breath now visible in the cooling air. The shimmering intensified, coalescing into a visible distortion about 2 meters in diameter. Unlike the golden portals of the gate, this rift appeared as a darkening of reality itself, as if Psalm E1 had begun to erase a section of the world. "Is that what we're waiting for?" Tenten asked, voice hushed. "I think it's just beginning," Naruto replied, feeling the gate respond within him, the Golden energy stirring like a creature sensing a threat. The darkening continued until the rift became a perfect circle of absolute blackness, not merely dark, but a complete absence of light, depth, or dimension. For several minutes, nothing else happened. Then, movement within the void. Something pushing against the boundary between realities. A probing, testing pressure that made the air itself seem to groan in protest. Naruto felt Kurama stir within him, the 9 tails fully alert now. "Be ready, kid," the fox's voice echoed in his mind. "Whatever's coming doesn't belong here." The pressure built until, with a sound like tearing fabric magnified 1,000-fold, the rift bulged outward. A limb emerged, scaled, ending in curved talons that gripped the edge of reality itself, pulling wider the tear between worlds. Another limb followed, then a head pushed through, reptilian but with too many eyes, arranged in asymmetrical patterns across a skull that seemed to shift its dimensions as they watched. The creature heaved itself partially through the rift, its body still half contained in the other reality. "What is that thing?" Tenten breathed, her hands moving automatically to her weapon scrolls. "Nothing from our world," Naruto replied grimly, already reaching for the gate. "Stay back. We don't know what it's capable of." The creature paused, its numerous eyes swiveling independently until several fixed on their position. It made a sound. Not quite a roar, not quite speech, but something between that reverberated through the temple complex, dislodging small stones from the ancient walls. Then it lunged with shocking speed, covering half the distance to their hiding place in a single bound. Naruto didn't hesitate. A golden portal opened before him, and he called forth Durandal, the legendary sword materializing in his hand. In the same moment, he created 3 shadow clones that immediately spread out to flank the creature. Tenten unrolled one of her scrolls, summoning a barrage of conventional weapons, kunai, shuriken, and senbon that she launched with pinpoint accuracy at the creature's many eyes. The projectiles struck true, but seemed to pass through the creature without effect. As if its physical form wasn't entirely present in their reality. It continued its charge, focusing now on Naruto and the golden portal still shimmering beside him. "Physical attacks aren't working," Tenten shouted, already switching tactics, her hands forming seals. "Fire style. Dragon flame jutsu." A stream of intense fire erupted from her mouth, engulfing the creature. This had more effect. The beast recoiled, its outer scales blackening under the assault. But the damage seemed superficial, and it recovered quickly, that strange roar speech vibrating the air around them. Naruto leapt forward, Durandal raised to strike. The sword connected with the creature's foreleg, and this time there was definite effect. The legendary blade cut deeply, drawing ichor that hissed and steamed where it struck the stone floor. The creature retaliated with blinding speed, its tail whipping around to slam Naruto into a temple wall with bone-crushing force. Only a hasty substitution jutsu saved him, allowing him to replace his body with a fallen stone block at the last moment. The gate weapons hurt it. He called to Tenten, who had retreated to higher ground. But it's fast. Understanding immediately, Tenten changed position, providing covering fire with explosive tags attached to kunai, creating distractions that allowed Naruto to maneuver closer to the creature. Naruto opened 2 more portals, calling forth additional weapons, a spear that could pierce any defense, and a shield that could withstand any force. Thus armed, he engaged the creature directly while his shadow clones harassed it from multiple angles. The battle raged through the temple complex, walls crumbling under the creature's powerful blows, ancient stones scorched by Tenten's fire techniques. The beast was incredibly strong, but seemed confused by fighting multiple opponents simultaneously, its many eyes unable to track all threats at once. Gradually, they forced it back toward the rift, Naruto's weapons inflicting increasingly severe wounds while Tenten maintained constant pressure with ninjutsu and perfectly timed explosive tags. "We need to force it back through," Naruto shouted, ducking under a sweeping claw. "If we kill it here, we don't know what effect its death might have on our world." Tenten nodded her understanding, changing tactics again to position her attacks to drive the creature toward the rift. The beast seemed to realize their strategy, becoming more desperate in its attacks, its roar speech taking on a different quality, almost like it was calling for something. "Hurry," Naruto urged, sensing a change in the rift itself. It was widening further, the tear between realities growing without the creature actively pulling it. With a final coordinated assault, they drove the beast back to the edge of the void. Naruto landed a decisive blow with Durandal, severing one of the creature's limbs entirely. It reared back in pain and fury, teetering at the rift's edge. "Now," Naruto shouted. Tenten triggered her largest explosive tags simultaneously, the concussive force hitting the creature like a tidal wave, pushing it back into the rift. It thrashed and fought, but momentum carried it through. Its strange multi-eyed head the last to disappear into the void. But the rift didn't close. Instead, it pulsed, expanding suddenly to nearly twice its previous size. And from within it emerged not another creature, but a humanoid figure, tall, regal, clothed in gleaming armor of an unfamiliar design. A helmet concealed the figure's features, but there was no mistaking the aura of power that surrounded it, similar to chakra, but denser, more concentrated, almost solid in its intensity. The figure stepped fully into their reality, the rift contracting slightly behind it. It surveyed the ruined courtyard calmly, taking in the destruction, the scattered weapons, and finally, Naruto and Tenten themselves. When it spoke, the words were incomprehensible, a language unlike any in their world, yet somehow Naruto understood the meaning, if not the specific sounds. "The treasury has found a new wielder," the figure said, its tone neither friendly nor hostile, merely assessing. "Interesting." Earlier than expected, Naruto stepped forward, Durandal still in hand, his stance cautious but not overtly threatening. "Who are you? What was that creature?" The figure tilted its helmeted head. "You understand me." More interesting still, it made no move to approach closer. "I am a Ruru, guardian of boundaries." The beast was a Yugalu, a storm demon that tests the barriers between realms. "It is my duty to ensure such creatures do not establish footholds in unprepared worlds." "You're from Gilgamesh's world," Naruto stated rather than asked, pieces falling into place. "I served the King of Heroes, yes." Though he did not always appreciate such service. There was a hint of dry humor in the voice now. "And you, young one, have somehow acquired his treasury. A feat not achieved in 12 cycles." Tenten moved to stand beside Naruto, her weapon still ready but held less aggressively. "What did you mean by earlier than expected?" Aruru turned slightly to regard her. "The pattern unfolds according to certain rhythms. The treasury manifesting, champions arising, barriers thinning, confrontation, resolution. But this cycle has accelerated." The helmet turned back to Naruto. "Because of you, I suspect. You are different from previous wielders. I have the 9 tails sealed within me," Naruto explained, sensing no immediate threat from this being. Could that be affecting the cycle? A powerful entity of your world, bound to your soul. Aruru seemed to consider this. Yes, that would create resonances, amplifications. The treasury responds to the wielder's nature. Your dual existence would naturally distort the expected patterns. The rift pulsed again, contracting further. Aruru glanced back at it. Our time grows short. The passage cannot be maintained indefinitely. The guardian returned attention to Naruto. You fought well against the Yugalu. But it was merely the first. The vanguard. Others will follow, each stronger than the last. Why? Tenten asked. What do they want? The treasury, primarily. The power it represents. But also expansion. New territory, new energies to consume. Aruru's voice darkened. In my realm, they are contained, countered by divine powers and ancient pacts. Here, those safeguards do not exist. Except for the gate itself, Naruto realized. The weapons of the treasury were designed to fight beings like these. Indeed, Gilgamesh collected them for precisely that purpose, though personal glory was his stated motivation. Aruru seemed almost amused. You have an advantage he lacked, however. What's that? You do not stand alone. The guardian gestured to Tenten, then more broadly, as if indicating the world beyond the temple. Gilgamesh acknowledged no equals, accepted no true allies until too late in his reign. His strength was immense but solitary. Yours. Aruru paused. Yours is different. Multiple sources, interwoven. The rift contracted again, now barely large enough for a person to pass through. Aruru stepped back toward it. I must return. The boundaries must be maintained from both sides. The guardian raised a hand in what might have been a salute. We will meet again, new king. Prepare yourself. The real challenges have yet to begin. With those ominous words, Aruru stepped back through the rift, which sealed itself moments later, reality knitting back together until no trace of the void remained. Silence fell over the ruined temple, broken only by the settling of disturbed stones and the distant call of night birds, returning now that the unnatural presence had departed. Well, Tenten said finally, lowering her weapons, I guess Casimir wasn't entirely lying about the incursions. No, Naruto agreed, returning Durandal and his other armaments to the gate. But I doubt he told us the whole truth either. They made a thorough search of the temple complex, finding nothing but ancient stones and the damage from their battle. No sign of Casimir or his collectors, no cation that anyone had observed the confrontation. What now? Tenten asked as they prepared to depart. Back to Konoha to report. Naruto nodded, his expression grave. Tsunade needs to know about this immediately. If these incursions are going to increase in frequency and strength. He didn't need to finish the thought. The implications were clear. A new kind of threat was emerging, one that conventional ninja tactics and techniques might be ill-equipped to counter. As they journeyed through the night, putting distance between themselves and the temple site, Naruto found himself reflecting on Aruru's words. The guardian had called him new king, a title he neither wanted nor felt comfortable with. Yet the responsibility was undeniable. He wielded the gate now, and with it came the duty. To use its power as Gilgamesh ultimately had, to protect. But unlike Gilgamesh, he wouldn't face this challenge alone. He had Tenten beside him already, and in Konoha, friends and comrades whose strengths complemented his own. Together, perhaps they could prepare for whatever came next. The thought had barely formed when he sensed a familiar chakra signature ahead, controlled, precise, unmistakable. Someone's waiting for us, he warned Tenten, who immediately went on alert. They slowed their pace, approaching cautiously until the figure became visible in the pre-dawn light, a woman with long dark hair and distinctive pale eyes. Perched calmly on a boulder beside the path. Hinata, Naruto called, surprised but relieved to see a friendly face. She stood gracefully, her Byakugan already activated. Veins prominent around her eyes as she scanned the surrounding area for threats before focusing on them. Naruto, Tenten, she nodded to each in turn. Lady Tsunade sent me to find you. Something's happening in Konoha. Something connected to what you're investigating. What do you mean? Tenten asked, concern evident in her voice. Is the village under attack? Not exactly, Hinata replied, her typically gentle demeanor underscored by unusual urgency. 3 days ago, a group arrived at the gates claiming to be guardians of divine law. They demanded to speak with the one who has claimed the king's mantle. Naruto felt a chill that had nothing to do with the mountain air. Did they attack? No. They're camped outside the village, waiting. Hinata's pale eyes fixed on him. They said they would speak only with you. That they've come to judge your worthiness. When Lady Tsunade couldn't reach you directly, she sent me to find you and escort you back as quickly as possible. These guardians, Tenten asked. What do they look like? How many? 7 in total. They appear human, but... Hinata hesitated, searching for the right words. The Byakugan sees chakra networks in all living things. But theirs are unlike anything I've encountered. The energy flows differently, more geometrically. She turned back to Naruto. They carry no visible weapons, yet every instinct says they're dangerous. Naruto exchanged glances with Tenten, both recognizing the implications. These guardians were likely from the same reality as Aruru and the creature they'd fought, another Mani. Festation of the cycle Casimir had warned about. We need to move, Naruto decided. Hinata, tell us everything you know about these visitors as we travel. As they set off toward Konoha at increased speed, Naruto felt the gate responding to his concern, the golden energy within him swirling with anticipation. He had faced many challenges in his life, enemy ninja, criminal organizations, even goddess-like entities during the war. But this felt different. These incursions represented something outside the natural order of their world, operating by rules they didn't fully understand. And somehow, he had become central to the conflict simply by accepting the gate of Babylon. The chains of heaven, Enkidu, stirred in his awareness, as if offering reassurance. He had controlled the gate's influence on his mind. He would master this situation as well. Not alone, but with friends and comrades at his side. With that determination firmly in mind, Naruto increased his pace, Tenten and Hinata match. Ing him stride for stride as they raced toward Konoha and whatever judgment awaited. They reached the outskirts of Konoha by late afternoon, having pushed themselves to the limit of endurance. Even before the village came into view, Naruto could sense the unusual energy signatures Hinata had described. 7 distinct presences, powerful but contained, waiting with infinite patience at the northern edge of the village. Tsunade had deployed Anbu units in a loose perimeter around the visitors' encampment, maintaining observation while keeping a respectful distance. As Naruto, Tenten, and Hinata approached, one of the masked operatives detached from cover to intercept them. Uzumaki, the Anbu addressed him directly. The Hokage is waiting at observation post 3. She instructed me to bring you there immediately upon your arrival. Quote, they followed the operative through the forest, skirting the main roads to avoid drawing attention. The observation post turned out to be a well-concealed structure built into the upper branches of a massive oak, offering clear sightlines to the clearing where the mysterious visitors had established their presence. Tsunade stood at the post's main window, arms crossed, expression tense. Shikamaru and Kakashi flanked her, both studying the encampment with professional focus. Finally, Tsunade said as they entered, not bothering with formal greetings. Tell me what we're dealing with. Naruto stepped to the window, observing the visitors for himself. 7 figures sat in a perfect circle in the middle of the clearing, apparently meditating. They were identical white robes with gold embroidery, their faces concealed by deep hoods. Despite their meditative posture, there was nothing passive about their presence. Even at this distance, Naruto could feel the latent power they contained. They're from another reality, he said, turning back to Tsunade. The same world where the Gate of Babylon originated. Succinctly, he and Tenten reported a verit thing that had occurred since leaving Konoha. Their infiltration of the collector's camp, the meeting with Casimir, the temple incursion, and their encounter with Aruru. Tsunade listened without interruption, though her expression darkened progressively as the implications became clear. So these guardians are here to determine if you're worthy of wielding this gate, she summarized when they'd finished. And if they decide you're not. Quote, I don't know, Naruto admitted. But given what we've seen of their world's power, forcing them to leave could be catastrophic for the village. We can't just surrender to their judgment either. Kakashi pointed out, we know nothing about their criteria or their authority. Troublesome, Shikamaru muttered, his standard response to complex problems. There may be an opportunity here as well as a threat. If they're willing to communicate, We could learn more about these incursions, maybe even gain allies against whatever's coming. Tsunade turned to Hinata. Your Byakugan gives you the clearest view of their energy. What's your assessment? Hinata activated her bloodline limit again, studying the 7 figures with her enhanced vision. Their chakra, if it can be called that, remains perfectly controlled. Contained. There's no leakage, no fluctuation that would indicate hostile intent. She deactivated the Byakugan, blinking as her eyes returned to normal. But the potential power is enormous. Like looking at 7 cage-level opponents, each with reserves that dwarf even Naruto's. Great, Tsunade sighed. Just what we needed. More god-level entities taking an interest in our affairs. She fixed Naruto with a penetrating stare. You realize what's happening, don't you? Every time you acquire some new power, the universe seems determined to test it immediately. Naruto couldn't help a small smile despite the gravity of the situation. Just my luck, I guess. Luck has nothing to do with it, Tsunade retorted, though without real heat. Power attracts power, always has. She turned back to the window, considering their options. Well, they've asked for you specifically. Keeping you hidden won't solve anything. I'll meet with them, Naruto decided. But not alone. Obviously, Tsunade agreed. Shikamaru, Kakashi, you'll accompany him as Konoha's representatives. Hinata, your Byakugan will be essential for monitoring their energy signatures during the meeting. Tenten, your knowledge of the recent events makes you valuable as well. What about me? A new voice asked from the entrance. They turned to find Sakura standing there, arms crossed. Expression determined. If Naruto's walking into another potential god fight, you'll need a medic ready. Sakura, Tsunade acknowledged her apprentice with a nod. Sensible precaution. But you stay on the perimeter, ready to respond if needed. With roles assigned, they developed a quick strategy for the meeting. Naruto would approach openly as requested, with his support team positioned strategically, close enough to assist if needed, far enough to avoid appearing threatening. Remember, Tsunade instructed as they prepared to move out, this is diplomatic as much as tactical. We know almost nothing about their culture, their values, or their expectations. Let Naruto take the lead in the conversation, but observe everything. Any detail might be important later. They descended from the observation post, moving through the forest with practiced stealth until they reached the perimeter established by the Anbu. Here, they paused for final preparations. Naruto, Kakashi said quietly. Don't try to deceive them. Beings of this level can typically sense falsehood. Answer honestly, but be mindful of how much you reveal about our world's capabilities. And do not get provoked into displaying more power than necessary, Shikamaru added. Information asymmetry works both ways. Let them wonder about your limits. Naruto nodded, appreciating their counsel. I'll be careful. Taking a deep breath, he stepped past the Anbu perimeter into the clearing. The 7 hooded figures remained in their meditative circle, showing no reaction to his approach. When he reached a respectful distance, about 10 meters from their position, he stopped and waited. For several minutes, nothing happened. Then, as if responding to some signal imperceptible to human senses, all 7 figures rose simultaneously. Moving with perfect synchronization, Uzumaki Naruto, they spoke in unison, their voices overlapping in a harmonic resonance that seemed to vibrate the air itself. Wielder of the 9-tailed beast. Claimant to the treasury of the King of Heroes. I am Naruto Uzumaki, he confirmed, standing tall despite the oppressive aura they projected. I've come as requested. The 7 figures arranged themselves in a semicircle facing him, hoods still concealing their features. When they spoke again, only one voice emerged, the central figure, slightly taller than the others. I am Naizuba, first judge of the Divine Council. These are my fellow judges. The voice was neither male nor female, but something between or perhaps beyond such distinctions. We have come to evaluate your claim upon the power you now wield. I didn't claim it, Naruto replied evenly. It accepted me when it rejected another. Indeed, Naizuba tilted their hooded head slightly. The treasury chooses, but the council judges. Such has been the compact since the treasury first manifested between realities. A different judge spoke next, the figure to Naizuba's right. Show us the gate, child of this world. Let us see how it responds to your call. Naruto hesitated only briefly before complying. He focused on the warm presence within him, opening a portal beside him, not large, but clearly visible. The golden ripple in reality unmistakable. From the portal, he called forth a single weapon, not one of the legendary noble phantasms like Durandal, but a simple golden spear, beautiful but not ostentatious in its design. The judges observed in silence, their hooded heads moving slightly as if communicating without words. Finally, Nizuba spoke again. The treasury acknowledges you, this is clear. But acknowledgement is not the same as worthiness. The head judge stepped forward, hand extended. With your permission, we would look upon your spirit directly. To judge fairly, we must see what the treasury sees in you. Naruto glanced back toward where his comrades waited at the edge of the clearing. Hinata gave a subtle nod. Her Byakugan detected no deception or gathering of harmful energy. Still, the request made him uneasy. What exactly does that involve? He asked, returning the spear to the gate but leaving the portal open. I will touch your forehead, Nizuba explained. Through that contact, we will perceive the essential nature of your being, your strengths, your flaws, your deepest motivations. We will not alter anything, merely observe. And if I refuse, then, judgment will be rendered based solely on your external actions and the treasury's response to you. Nizuba's voice remained neutral. The assessment would be incomplete, potentially to your disadvantage. Naruto considered his options. Refusing would demonstrate distrust, potentially setting a negative tone for relations with these beings who clearly had significant knowledge about the gate and the incursions. Yet allowing such intimate access to his mind and spirit carried obvious risks. In the end, his instincts decided for him. Throughout his life, openness had served him better than secrecy, honesty better than calculation. All right, he agreed. You can look, but only look, nothing else. Agreed, Nizuba replied, stepping closer until they stood directly before Naruto. The judge raised both hands, pushing back their hood to reveal a face of startling beauty, neither clearly male nor female, with features that seemed to shift subtly moment by moment, as if unable to settle on a single appearance. The eyes, however, remained constant, iridescent, containing colors Naruto had no names for. Those remarkable eyes fixed on his as Nizuba placed cool fingertips against his forehead. Remain still, the judge instructed. This will take but a moment. Contact. Naruto's perception exploded outward, his consciousness suddenly existing in multiple places simultaneously. He was in the clearing with the judges, but also elsewhere, floating in a vast space filled with golden light, facing 7 entities whose true forms bore little resemblance to their human appearances in the physical world. Here, the judges appeared as complex geometric patterns of light and energy, constantly shifting yet maintaining a fundamental harmony. And they were looking at him, not his physical form, but the essence of who he was. Laid bare in this strange intermediate space, Naruto felt their examination, cool, analytical, but not invasive. They observed his connections to Kurama, to the gate, to the people who formed his bonds of friendship and loyalty. They witnessed key moments of his life, his lonely childhood, his determination to be acknowledged, his refusal to abandon Sasuke, his growth through pain and perseverance, his choices during the war. And through it all, they focused particularly on one aspect, how he viewed power itself. Not as an entitlement, not as validation of superiority, but as a responsibility. A means to protect, to connect, to change the world for the better. As suddenly as it had begun, the examination ended. Naruto found himself back in the clearing, Nizuba's hand withdrawing from his forehead. The judge replaced their hood, rejoining the semicircle of their fellows. For several minutes, the judges communicated silently among themselves. Then Nizuba addressed him once more. Interesting, the head judge said, that single word carrying layers of meaning. You are unlike previous wielders in ways both concerning and promising. Is that good or bad? Naruto asked directly. Neither, or both. Nizuba made a gesture that might have been the equivalent of a shrug. The treasury has always sought wielders of exceptional capability, but it has not always prioritized wisdom alongside strength. Another judge spoke, the one at the far left of the semicircle. Your connection to the 9-tailed beast complicates matters. Such a union creates resonances we had not anticipated. As does your world itself, added a third judge. The energy you call chakra interacts with the treasury's power in novel ways. Naizaba raised a hand, silencing the others. We have reached our judgment. Naruto Uzumaki, you may continue to wield the treasury of the King of Heroes, with certain conditions. What conditions? Naruto asked, cautious but relieved the judgment appeared favorable. First, you must continue to master the treasury's full capabilities. Ignorance of its power will not excuse catastrophic misuse. Naizaba's voice took on a more formal tone, as if reciting from ancient law. Second, you must prepare your world for the incursions that have already begun. The barriers between realities weaken further with each passage. And third, the head judge continued, you must be prepared to relinquish the treasury should your stewardship prove inadequate to the challenges ahead. Power of this magnitude cannot remain in hands that cannot control it. That's it? Naruto asked, surprised by conditions that seemed mainly to align with his own intentions. Those are our formal conditions, Naizaba clarified. We also offer counsel, should you wish to hear it. I'll listen to any advice you're willing to give, Naruto replied honestly. The judges seemed to approve of this response, their postures relaxing slightly. The one who calls himself Casimir is not what he appears. One judge warned. His knowledge of the treasury is extensive, but incomplete. And his purposes are complex. The weapons you have accessed thus far represent merely the surface of the treasury's depths. Another advised, seek the conceptual armaments, those that embody principles rather than merely physical force. They will prove essential against what comes. Naizaba raised a hand again. Most importantly, remember that the treasury reflects its wielder. Gilgamesh's arrogance shaped how the weapons responded to his call. Your nature will likewise influence their manifestation. The head judge's voice softened slightly. This may prove to be your greatest advantage. With that, the judges stepped back, reforming their circle. Our judgment is rendered, they intoned together. We withdraw from this world, but we will observe. The cycle continues, but its path may yet be altered. A sudden flash of golden light enveloped the circle. When it faded, the clearing stood empty. No trace remaining of the 7 judges. Naruto stood alone for a moment, processing everything that had occurred. Then his comrades emerged from the forest perimeter, joining him in the clearing. Well, that was enlightening, Kakashi remarked dryly. And surprisingly nonviolent for a divine judgment. What did they show you? Hinata asked quietly, noticing Naruto's thoughtful expression. When they touched your forehead. Everything, Naruto replied simply. They saw everything that makes me who I am. And they judged based on that, not just on power or potential. A thorough approach, Shikamaru observed. But what does their approval actually mean for us? It means we need to prepare, Naruto said, his expression growing serious. The incursions Casimir warned about are real, and they're going to increase. Beings and creatures from another reality trying to breach our world. And you're somehow central to stopping them, Sakura concluded, having joined them from her position at the perimeter. Because of this gate you now control. Yes, Naruto closed the portal that had remained open throughout the judgment, the golden light fading from the clearing. But I can't do it alone. None of us can. Tsunade approached from the observation post, having witnessed the entire exchange. Then we do what Konoha has always done, she said firmly. We adapt, we prepare, we stand together. She looked around at the assembled ninja. Starting now, as they walked back toward the village, discussing immediate actions and longer-term strategies, Naruto felt Somethi. He hadn't experienced since discovering the gate, a sense of clarity and purpose. The judge's examination had forced him to confront his own relationship with power, to recognize how fundamentally it differed from Gilgamesh's approach. Where the ancient king had collected treasures to validate his superiority, Naruto sought strength to protect those precious to him. Where Gilgamesh had stood above and apart, Naruto stood with and among. Perhaps that, more than anything else, was why the gate had accepted him when it had rejected Kagami. The chains of heaven, Enkidu, stirred in his awareness. Again, a reminder of how friendship had transformed even the arrogant king of heroes. With that thought in mind, Naruto glanced at his comrades walking beside him, each bringing their own strengths to the challenges ahead. Together, they would face whatever came through the thinning barriers between worlds. Together, they would protect their home. The cycle continued, but as Naizaba had said, its path might yet be altered. And Naruto Uzumaki had never been one to accept destiny without having his say in the matter. Chapter 2 End. Chapter 3. The Collector's Challenge. 2 weeks had passed since the Divine Judgment, and Konoha hummed with purposeful activity. Tsunade had convened an emergency council immediately after the judge's departure, briefing the village elders and clan heads on the situa. Tion in broad terms: mysterious artifacts of great power, potential incursions from another reality, and the need for heightened readiness without causing public panic. For Naruto, the days had been filled with intensive training, strategy sessions, and increasingly confident exploration of the gate's capabilities. With Tenten's systematic approach to cataloging weapons and Hinata's Byakugan to OBS. How the gate's energy interacted with his chakra network, his control had improved dramatically. Today found him in Training Ground 44 again, now officially designated as a restricted area for specialized jutsu development, Tsunade's cover story for Naruto's practice with the gate. A small group had gathered to observe and assist. Tenten, Hinata, Sakura, and Kakashi, each bringing unique insights to his training. Try maintaining multiple portals at different distances, Tenten suggested from her position at the edge of the clearing. Combat situations won't always allow you to open them right beside you. Naruto nodded, concentrating on the sensation of the gate's energy. With practiced ease, he opened 5 portals simultaneously, one directly in front of him, 2 flanking him at 10-meter intervals. And 2 more positioned 30 meters away at the clearing's edge. Good, Kakashi observed, his Sharingan exposed to track the energy flow. Now try varying the size and orientation. Responding to the instruction, Naruto adjusted the portals, some expanding, others contracting, all shifting to different angles relative to the ground. Where once this level of manipulation would have required intense concentration, he now maintained it with relative ease, the connection between his will and the gate strengthening daily. Your chakra adaptation is stabilizing, Hinata reported, her Byakugan active. The golden energy pathways are fully integrated with your existing network. They're not competing anymore, they're complementing each other. I can feel the difference, Naruto confirmed. It's like having 2 circulatory systems that have finally synchronized. From each portal, he summoned different weapons, a sword from one, a spear from another, a shield, a bow, and finally, a massive battle axe that would have been impossible for most humans to wield. The weapons hovered before their respective portals, responsive to his slightest thought. Time for the combat sequence, Kakashi directed, stepping back to give more space. This was the most challenging part of their training regimen, practical application of the gate in simulated battle conditions. Naruto took a deep breath, centering himself as his friends moved to predetermined positions around the clearing. Begin, Kakashi called. Immediately, Tenten launched a barrage of conventional weapons from multiple directions. While Sakura charged with chakra-enhanced strength, and Kakashi created shadow clones that attacked from unexpected angles. Hinata remained on the sidelines, monitoring the energy dynamics rather than participating directly. Naruto responded with fluid precision, directing the hovering weapons to intercept Tenten's projectiles while simultaneously opening new portals to counter Sakura and Kakashi's approaches. He no longer needed to physically hold the weapons to direct them, a significant advancement in his technique that multiplied his combat effectiveness. The training session intensified, with his friends increasing the pressure, forcing Naruto to adapt constantly. He called forth more specialized weapons as needed, a net of golden chains to entangle Kakashi's clones, a shield that absorbed and nullified Sakura's chakra-enhanced strikes, a fan that generated wind powerful enough to deflect Tenten's most concentrated barrages. Throughout it all, Naruto maintained awareness of not just the physical battle but the energy dynamics Hinata had described. He could feel the interplay between his normal chakra, Kurama's power, and the gate's golden energy, 3 distinct sources flowing together in harmony, each amplifying the others when properly balanced. After 20 minutes of continuous combat simulation, Kakashi called a halt. Naruto returned all weapons to the gate, closing the portals with barely a thought. Despite the intensity of the exercise, he wasn't even breathing hard, another benefit of his improved energy integration. Impressive progress, Kakashi Akno. WL edged as they gathered in the center of the clearing. Your reaction time with the gate is nearly instantaneous now. The weapon selection is getting more intuitive too, Tenten added, collecting he conventional weapons she'd scattered across the training ground. You're choosing optimal counters instead of just powerful ones. Naruto nodded, accepting the water canteen Sakura offered. I'm starting to feel the personality of each weapon more clearly. Some are eager to be used, others more reluctant depending on the situation. The sentience patterns are fascinating, Hinata commented, deactivating her Byakugan and blinking as her vision returned to normal. The weapons aren't fully conscious, but they have impressions, memories almost, that respond to your intent. Their discus. Sion was interrupted by the arrival of a messenger, an Anbu operative who appeared at the edge of the clearing in a swirl of leaves. Uzumaki Naruto, the masked ninja addressed him formally. Lady Hokage requests your immediate presence. The others as well, he added, gesturing to the group. They exchanged concerned glances. For Tsunade to summon all of them simultaneously suggested something significant had developed. Did she say what this is about? Kakashi asked, already pulling his headband down to cover his Sharingan. Only that it concerns the matter you've been training for, the Anbu replied. Then disappeared as abruptly as he'd arrived. So much for our cool-down exercises, Sakura sighed, gathering her gear. They made their way to the Hokage Tower at ninja speed, traversing rooftops to avoid the busy streets below. Despite the gravity of recent developments, Naruto felt a surge of confidence. The training was paying off, his understanding of the gate deepening daily. Whatever new challenge awaited, he was better prepared to meet it than he had been 2 weeks ago. Tsunade was not alone when they arrived at her office. Shikamaru stood beside her desk, studying a map spread across its surface. Shizune hovered nearby, clutching a stack of reports with obvious concern. And to Naruto's surprise, Sai sat calmly in a corner, sketching something with quick, precise strokes. Good, you're here. Tsunade acknowledged their arrival without preamble. We have a situation. The collectors, Naruto guessed, noting the tension in the room. Possibly 4 separate incursions they've been reported in the past 72 hours. Tsunade gestured to the map, where Shikamaru had marked several locations with red pins. Each one matches the pattern you described, reality thinning, creatures emerging, then retreating after causing limited damage. 4 at once. Tenten stepped forward, studying the map with professional interest. That's a significant escalation, and suspiciously coordinated, Shikamaru added. These aren't random weak points in the barriers between worlds. The incursions form a perfect square around this central location. He tapped a spot on the map marked with a black pin. Naruto leaned closer, recognizing the area. That's near the border between the Land of Fire and the Land of Sound, the ruins of Orochimaru's old northern hideout. Exactly, Tsunade confirmed. A location already associated with forbidden experiments and dimensional research. Orochimaru was obsessed with accessing other planes of existence before he fixated on immortality. You think someone's using his old research? Sakura asked, concern evident in her voice. Or the location itself has properties that make the barrier between worlds naturally thinner, Shikamaru suggested. Either way, the pattern is deliberate. These outlying incursions appear to be preparing for something larger at the central point. Are distractions, Kakashi offered, drawing attention and resources away from their true objective. Quote, Tsunade nodded. All possibilities we've considered, which is why I'm not sending you to deal with the incursions directly. Other teams are handling containment at those sites. She fixed her gaze on Naruto. I want you and your team to investigate the central location. Determine what's happening there and neutralize any threat before it fully manifests. When do we leave? Naruto asked, already mentally preparing for the mission. Immediately. Sai will accompany you. His ink beasts can provide aerial reconnaissance without risking direct contact. Tsunade turned to Shikamaru. Brief them on everything we know about the target location. As Shikamaru outlined the details, terrain, potential approaches, recent unusual activities detected by border trolls, Naruto found his attention drawn to Sai's sketch. The pale artist had created a detailed rendering of what appeared to be a complex seal array, concentric circles filled with unfamiliar symbols. What's that? He asked when Shikamaru finished his briefing. Sai held up the drawing. A partial reconstruction of a seal found near one of the incursion sites. It doesn't match any known sealing technique from our world. It's similar to the inscriptions in the temple where I found the gate, Naruto realized, studying the symbols. But altered, adapted to work with chakra rather than whatever energy they originally used. Someone's combining technologies, Kakashi said grimly. Using our world's sealing techniques to manipulate or amplify effects from the other reality. Casimir, Tenten suggested. He's been studying artifacts from the gate for years. He might have figured out how to adapt their principles to our world's energy systems. Possibly, Tsunade agreed, but his motives remain unclear. Is he trying to prevent larger incursions as he claimed, or facilitating them for his own purposes? She stood, signaling the end of the briefing. That's what you need to find out. Observe first, engage only if necessary. If Casimir is there, attempt to determine his true agenda before taking any hostile action. And if we confirm he's working against Konoha's interests? Naruto asked. Tsunade's expression hardened. Then you have authorization to use whatever force necessary to neutralize the threat. Including your new capabilities. The implications were clear. Tsunade was giving Naruto permission to use the gate's full power if the situation warranted it, a significant departure from her usual caution regarding unique abilities that might draw unwanted attention. Understood, Naruto acknowledged, the responsibility settling on his shoulders. One more thing, Tsunade added as they prepared to depart. We received this an hour ago. She handed Naruto a small scroll, sealed with an unfamiliar emblem, a stylized gate rendered in gold wax. It was delivered by a hawk none of our handlers recognized. Naruto broke the seal, unrolling the scroll to find elegant handwriting in ink that seemed to shimmer slightly on the parchment. To the new wielder of the treasury. The game advances more rapidly than anticipated. Forces beyond your current understanding converge on the nexus point. What you perceive as threat may be opportunity, what appears as ally may be adversary. I will meet you at the convergence. Bring your strongest weapons and sharpest insights. The true test of your worthiness approaches, not from divine judges with their abstract standards, but from one who understands the practical application of power. With respect and anticipation, Casimir. A challenge, Naruto summarized. Passing the scroll to Kakashi. He knew about the incursions before they happened, and he knows we'll be investigating. A trap, more likely, Sakura frowned. He's trying to draw you out specifically. Or he genuinely believes he's helping in his own way, Hinata suggested, her expression thoughtful. His wording is respectful, almost instructive. Regardless of his intentions, he's involved in whatever's happening at that location, Tsunade concluded. Approach with extreme caution. If this is indeed some kind of test or challenge, remember that you represent not just yourself but Konoha. With final instructions received and equipment gathered, the team departed within the hour. Naruto, Hinata, Sakura, Tenten, Kakashi, and Sai, moving swiftly through the forests of Fire Country toward the border region marked on Shikamaru's map. As they traveled, Naruto found himself contemplating Casimir's message. The man presented himself as a collector and scholar. Yet his actions suggested deeper motivations. And this talk of worthiness echoed the divine judge's assessment uncomfortably, as if Naruto were being evaluated from multiple angles, for purposes he didn't fully understand. What do you think of him? Naruto directed the thought inward, to where Kurama's consciousness resided alongside his own. Hard to say without meeting him directly, the Nine-Tails replied after a moment's consideration. But I've existed long enough to recognize patterns. Those who appoint themselves judges of others' worthiness typically have inflated opinions of their own. Yet he did warn us about the incursions, and that warning proved accurate, Naruto countered. Knowing about a danger isn't the same as having benevolent intentions regarding it, Kurama pointed out. The most dangerous manipulators always mix truth with deception. The fox had a point. Whatever Casimir's agenda, they needed to approach this meeting, if it occurred, with healthy skepticism. The Ate's power was significant enough to attract those who would seek to control or direct it for their own purposes. By nightfall, they had reached the outer perimeter of their target location, a rugged valley surrounded by forested hills. With the ruins of Orochimaru's abandoned hideout nestled against the northern ridge. They established a concealed camp several kilometers away, close enough for observation but hopefully beyond detection range of whatever sensors Casimir might have deployed. Sai, what do your scouts report? Kakashi asked as they gathered around a small, carefully shielded fire. The pale artist formed a hand seal, connecting with the ink creatures he'd sent to survey the area hours earlier. Activity centered on the ruins, as expected. Approximately 20 individuals moving equipment into the main structure. Several appear to be working on a large seal array in the central courtyard. Any sign of Casimir himself? Naruto asked. Not conclusively. There's one figure directing the operation who matches his general description, but my scouts couldn't get close enough for positive identification without risk of detection. What about the equipment they're moving? Tenten inquired. Anything identifiable? Quote. Sai sketched rapidly as he spoke, creating visual representations of what his ink creatures had observed. Large metal components, possibly for a containment structure. Numerous scrolls and artifacts. And this, he held up a drawing of what appeared to be a stone tablet covered in familiar inscriptions. Similar to the seal pattern found at the incursion sites, but more complex. They're building something, Hinata concluded, studying the sketches. A focal point for whatever they're planning to do with the barrier between worlds. Or a doorway, Naruto suggested grimly. A controlled passage rather than the random incursions we've seen so far. Kakashi considered this. If Casimir truly believes dangerous entities are trying to break through from the other reality, he might be attempting to create a more stable connection, one that could be monitored and potentially closed if necessary. Or he could be trying to bring something specific through, Sakura countered. Something too large or powerful to pass through the smaller rifts. Either way, we need more information before we decide how to proceed. Kakashi turned to Hinata. Can your Byakugan give us a clearer view from this distance? Hinata activated her bloodline limit, veins bulging around her eyes as she extended her enhanced vision toward the ruins. I can see the chakra signatures of everyone in the compound, she reported. Most appear to be ordinary humans, likely hired help or followers. But there are 3 signatures that stand out, denser, more controlled, with unusual flow patterns. Like the divine judges, Naruto asked. Similar principle but different manifestation, Hinata replied, still focused on her distant observation. Less geometric than the judges. More fluid, but equally foreign to our world's typical chakra structures. Entities from the other reality, working with Casimir willingly. Tenten suggested. Are under his control, Sakura added. If he's found a way to bind or direct them using adapted sealing techniques. Hinata suddenly stiffened, her concentration intensifying. There's something else. In the center of the seal array they're constructing, a distortion. Not quite a rift yet, but a thinning, just like you described from the temple incursion. Her voice tightened. It's pulsing, growing stronger with each pulse. Time frame? Kakashi asked tersely. Hours, not days, Hinata estimated. Whatever they're planning, it's happening soon. Naruto exchanged glances with his teammates. The mission parameters had just FTED from observation to potential intervention. We need to get closer, he decided. See exactly what they're doing before we determine how to respond. Agreed, Kakashi nodded. But we maintain stealth protocol. No engagement unless absolutely necessary. They moved out immediately, leaving their camp established as a fallback position. Under cover of darkness, they approached the ruins from different directions. Naruto and Hinata from the east, Sakura and Tenten from the west, Kakashi and Sai from the south, using the forested slopes for concealment. Naruto and Hinata reached a vantage point, overlooking the central courtyard of the ruined hideout. From here, the activity Sai's scouts had reported was clearly visible, a team of workers completing a massive seal array inscribed directly onto the stone floor of the courtyard. Torches and portable lights illuminated their work, creating a bubble of harsh brightness in the surrounding darkness. At the center of the array stood a structure, that hadn't been there during Sai's initial reconnaissance, a circular platform surrounded by 7 pillars, each inscribed with symbols that glowed with a faint golden light reminiscent of, but distinct from, the gate's energy. And supervising it all, issuing occasional instructions to the workers, was a figure Naruto recognized immediately despite the distance, Casimir, his silver hair gleaming in the torchlight. His posture conveying absolute confidence in whatever operation he was directing. Can you see what's happening in the center of that structure? Naruto whispered to Hinata. She focused her Byakugan, expression growing concerned. The distortion is centered there, between the pillars. It's stabilizing, becoming more defined. She frowned. And there's something on the platform. A collection of artifacts arranged in a specific pattern. What kind of artifacts? Weapons, mostly. A sword, a spear, what appears to be a shield. Her voice trailed off as she realized the implication. Items from the gate, Naruto confirmed grimly. He's using them as anchors or conduits. Before they could discuss further, Naruto felt a shift in the air, a subtle change in pressure that had nothing to do with weather patterns and everything to do with the thinning barriers between realities. Beside him, Hinata gasped softly. It's accelerating, she whispered urgently. The distortion, it's expanding much faster now. In the courtyard below, the workers had withdrawn from the central structure, taking positions at the outer edges of the seal array. Casimir remained closer, moving ethically around the circle of pillars, checking each inscription with careful attention to detail. Then he stopped, looking up directly toward Naruto and Hinata's position with uncanny accuracy. I know you're there, Naruto Uzumaki. His voice carried clearly across the distance. You and your companions. There's no need for further concealment. The preparatory phase is complete. Naruto tensed, exchanging glances with Hinata. Their cover blown, they had limited options. He activated his communication device, a small earpiece developed by Konoha's technology division for coordinated missions. Our position is compromised, he informed the others. Casimir has acknowledged our presence. Same here, Tenten's voice came through the device. We've got eyes on us from multiple positions. They don't appear hostile yet, but they're definitely aware. Hold positions, Kakashi instructed. Let's see what he wants before we make any moves. In the courtyard, Casimir had raised his hands in a gesture that might have been interpreted as peaceful, though Naruto remained skeptical. Please, join me, Casimir called out. What I'm about to demonstrate concerns you directly. All of you, he added, somehow aware of the entire team's positions despite their careful concealment. After a moment's hesitation, Naruto made a decision. I'll approach alone first, he told the others. Maintain your positions and be ready to provide support if needed. Naruto, Hinata began, concern evident in her voice. I'll be careful, he assured her. But we need to understand what he's doing, and he seems willing to explain. That's valuable intelligence whatever his motives. With Kakashi's reluctant agreement, Naruto descended from their vantage point, approaching the courtyard openly but with careful awareness of his surroundings. The workers watched his arrival with expressions ranging from curiosity to odd apprehension, but made no hostile moves. Casimir waited at the edge of the seal array, his pale eyes studying Naruto with undisguised interest. Right on time, he greeted, as if Naruto's arrival had been scheduled rather than a response to discovery. I was beginning to wonder if my message had been unclear. It was plenty clear, Naruto replied, stopping at a cautious distance. You mentioned a test. This doesn't look like a sparring ground. Casimir smiled slightly. Not all tests involve direct combat, though that may come later. This, he gestured to the elaborate setup behind him, is a demonstration. A practical education in what you've inherited. You're manipulating the barrier between worlds. Naruto observed, eyes fixed on the central structure where the distortion Hinata had described was now faintly visible even to normal sight, a shimmering in the air like heat waves. But with occasional flickers of color that belonged to no natural spectrum. Controlling it, Casimir corrected. There's a significant difference. He took a step closer, his expression earnest. The random incursions you've encountered thus far are dangerous precisely because they're uncontrolled, tears in reality that allow passage in both directions with no filtration, no selection. And you're offering a better alternative? Naruto asked skeptically. I'm offering understanding, Casimir replied. Knowledge you'll need regardless of how you choose to wield the treasury. He gestured toward the structure. What do you see there, with your connection to the gate? Look beyond the physical. Cautiously, Naruto extended his awareness toward the central platform, drawing on the gate's energy within him to enhance his perception. What had appeared as merely a collection of weapons arranged in a pattern revealed itself as something far more complex, each artifact positioned to create a resonance with the others, generating a harmonic frequency that interacted with the very fabric of reality. It's a tuning mechanism, he realized aloud. The weapons are creating a specific, vibration that affects the barrier. Quote, excellent. Casimir nodded, genuine approval in his voice. The treasury's items don't just possess individual power. Collectively, they can influence fundamental aspects of reality itself. Gilgamesh understood this, though he rarely had reason to employ such techniques. What exactly are you trying to do here? Naruto asked directly, increasingly uneasy about the pulsing distortion at the center of the platform. Establish communication, Casimir replied simply. A controlled dialogue with the other side, rather than random incursions and hasty retreats. He spread his hands. Knowledge, Naruto. The divine judges offered you cryptic warnings and vague counsel. I'm offering practical information about what you face, directly from the source. Before Naruto could respond, the distortion between the pillars intensified suddenly, colors swirling within it like oil on water. The workers around the courtyard tensed, some backing away further from the central structure. Right on schedule, Casimir commented, apparently pleased by the development. The resonance has reached optimal frequency. He turned back to Naruto. Call your companions down. They should witness this as well. After a moment's consideration, Naruto signaled to the others. If Casimir had wanted to launch an attack, he'd had ample opportunity. Whatever demonstration he planned, having his full team present to observe and analyze seemed the prudent course. Within minutes, the Konoha ninja had assembled at the edge of the courtyard, Hinata, Sakura, Tenten, Kakashi, and Sai. Each alert and ready but maintaining a non-aggressive stance. Honored guests, Casimir acknowledged them with a slight bow. Welcome to the first controlled interdimensional communication in the history of your world. You keep saying, controlled, Kakashi noted, his visible eye narrowed with suspicion. What exactly are you controlling, and how? Casimir gestured to the seal array beneath their feet. This adaptation of your world's sealing techniques creates a stable framework, like the banks of a river channeling water that would otherwise flood uncontrollably. He pointed to the pillars surrounding the platform. These serve as harmonic modulators, ensuring the resonance remains within specific parameters. And the artifacts at the center? Tenten asked, her expert eye cataloging each visible weapon. Anchors, Casimir explained. Items from the treasury have unique properties. They exist simultaneously in multiple realities, connected to their original forms in the gate. They provide a stable reference point for the communication channel. As he spoke, the distortion between the pillars expanded further, now a perfect circle about 2 meters in diameter. Unlike the void lick, rift Naruto had witnessed during the temple incursion, this portal maintained a translucent quality. One could see through it, albeit with significant distortion, to what appeared to be a vast golden hull on the other side. Behold, Casimir said with undisguised pride. A window between worlds, stably maintained, selectively permeable. Permeable to what? Sakura asked sharply, her medical training making her particularly sensitive to potential contamination threats. Information, primarily, Casimir assured her. Though small objects could pass through if specifically authorized by the seal configuration. His expression grew more serious. The incursions you've experienced thus far have been crude, violent attempts to force passage. This is diplomacy instead of invasion. Diplomacy with whom? Naruto asked, his attention fixed on the golden hull visible through the portal. Something about it stirred the fragmentary memories he'd received from the gate, a sense of familiarity just beyond conscious recall. Casimir smiled, a hint of theatrical timing in his gesture toward the portal. With the original architects of the treasury, of course. As if on cue, a figure appeared on the other side of the portal, tall. Clad in golden armor that caught and reflected light from unseen sources. Though distorted by the barrier between realities, the figure's regal bearing was unmistakable. That's not Gilgamesh, Naruto stated with certainty, drawing on the memories that had come with the gate. The king had favored gold, yes, but his armor had been distinctive in design. This was something else. Indeed not, Casimir confirmed. The King of Heroes no longer presides over the treasury in any reality. This is one of the custodians, beings who maintain the conceptual space we. The treasury exists between its manifestations in physical realms. The figure on the other side studied them with evident interest, though its features remained indistinct through the distortion of the portal. When it spoke, the words emerged as vibrations that the seal array somehow translated into comprehensible sound. The new wielder approaches the threshold, the custodian observed, it's VOICE neither male nor female but something altogether other. Earlier than protocol dictates. The cycle accelerates. As I informed you it would, Casimir replied, his tone suggesting this was a continuation of previous communications rather than a first contact. The unique conditions of this world, the energy called chakra, the tailed beasts, have created unprecedented resonances. The custodian's attention shifted to Naruto. You carry multiple sources of power, wielder. The treasury, the beast of 9 tails. The energy of your bloodline. Complex harmonies and potential dissonances. Who are you exactly? Naruto asked directly. What's your connection to the gate? We maintain. We preserve. We ensure continuity between manifestations. The custodian's phrasing was precise yet somehow abstract. When the treasury chooses a wielder, we observe. When cycles complete, we reset parameters. When violations occur, we implement corrections. Violations. Kakashi picked up on the term immediately. What constitutes a violation? Quote, the custodian seemed to consider the question. Disruption of fundamental balances. Extraction of treasury elements beyond established thresholds. Unauthorized. Transference of essential principles between realities. Naruto frowned, feeling he was missing important context. And these cycles you mentioned, what exactly completes a cycle? Transfer. Application. Consequence. Resolution. The custodian's answer was frustratingly opaque. The treasury manifests. A wielder emerges. Challenges arise. Outcome determines subsequent parameters. It's speaking. G of the pattern Aruru and the judges mentioned, Hinata realized, her Byakugan active as she studied the energies flowing around the portal. The recurring manifestation of the gate in different worlds, and the conflicts that follow. Precisely, Casimir confirmed. The treasury doesn't simply appear randomly. It follows cycles, patterns repeated across multiple realities with variations based on local conditions. He gestured to the custodian. These beings oversee the process, ensuring certain fundamental constants remain intact regardless of where the treasury manifests. The custodian's attention shifted suddenly, its posture becoming more alert. Anomaly detected. Unauthorized approach vectors. Multiple entities breaching peripheral barriers. Casimir tensed, turning to one of his workers. Status report from the outer teams. Nothing yet, sir, the man replied, checking a communication device. Last check-in was clear. Wait. He pressed a hand to his earpiece. Signal lost from outposts 2 and 4. It appears we have uninvited guests, Casimir said grimly, turning back to Naruto and his team. The demonstration may become more practical than intended. Before anyone could respond, explosions sounded from multiple directions outside the ruins. Size Inc. birds, circling overhead as sentinels, swooped down to deliver hasty reports via small scrolls. Armed force approaching from the northwest. Kakashi read quickly. Another from the east. Non-standard equipment, coordinated movement patterns. And something else, Hinata added urgently, her Byakugan focused beyond the courtyard walls. Energy signatures similar to the creature from the temple incursion, but stronger. At least 3 distinct entities, moving with the human forces. Naruto exchanged glances with his teammates. Whatever was happening, it had just escalated beyond a simple demonstration or test. You're doing? He asked Casimir directly. The silver-haired man shook his head, genuine concern evident in his expression. Not mine, but not entirely unexpected. He turned to the portal, addressing the custodian. Interference protocol. Maintain connection stability. Acknowledged, the custodian replied. Reinforcing threshold parameters. Limited support authorized under exceptional circumstances provision. The portal's edges stabilized, the fluctuations settling into a steady, controlled shimmer. Casimir turned back to the Konoha ninja, his manner shifting from scholarly to commanding in an instant. We're about to be attacked by those who would seize control of the connection we've established, he explained rapidly. Some are human, rivals who have pursued artifacts from the treasury for their own purposes. Others are entities from the other reality who seek unrestricted passage to your world. Convenient timing, Kakashi observed dryly, though he was already scanning the perimeter for defensive positions. Not convenience, causality, Casimir corrected. The stable connection created a beacon. Those sensitive to such energies would detect it immediately. He turned to Naruto. This is where theory meets practice, wielder of the treasury. Your first true test in defending what you've claimed. Before Naruto could respond, the northern wall of the courtyard exploded inward, stone fragments flying in all directions as something massive forced its way through. Unlike the reptilian Yugalu they'd faced at the temple, this entity resembled a giant bull with metallic skin and multiple horns arranged in a crown-like formation around its head. Gugalana variant, the custodian identified calmly from the portal. Corrupted aspect of the Bull of Heaven. Significant threat to localized reality stability. Almost simultaneously, human attackers poured through breaches in the eastern and western walls, men and women in practical combat gear, wielding weapons that glowed with unnatural energies. Not conventional ninja, but trained fighters nonetheless, moving with coordinated precision toward the central platform. Protect the connection point, Casimir shouted to his workers, who were already mobilizing defensive positions around the seal array. To Naruto, he added, now we shall see what the treasury has truly chosen. Will you defend the knowledge it offers, or retreat in the face of complexity? It was a challenge wrapped in a question, but Naruto had no time to analyze Casimir's motives. The bull-like entity was charging directly toward the central platform, while the human attackers engaged Casimir's forces in fierce combat around the courtyard perimeter. Hinata, Sakura, take the eastern attackers, Naruto directed quickly. Kakashi, Sai, western group. Tenten, with me on the bull thing. His teammates moved immediately, years of training allowing them to coordinate without elaborate instructions. Naruto turned to the charging entity, reaching for the gate within him. Golden portals opened around him. Not 1 or 2 but 8 simultaneously, Positio. Ned strategically to surround the bull entity as it thundered forward. From each portal emerged a different weapon, selected specifically for this opponent based on the knowledge that had come with the gate. Enkidu, Naruto called, and from the largest portal flowed the golden chains that had bound divine beings in Gilgamesh's time. They shot toward the charging bull entity, wrapping around its legs, torso, and horns with uncanny precision. The creature bellowed, a sound that vibrated the stones beneath their feet, as it fought against the restraints. The chains glowed brighter in response, tightening further with each struggle. Their power proportional to the divinity of what they bound. The chains affected strongly, Tenten observed, already launching a barrage of specialized sealing tags to reinforce Naruto's strategy. It must have significant divine essence. Gugalana was a divine construct in its original form. Casimir called from where he defended the central platform, wielding what appeared to be a staff of twisted metal that emitted pulses of energy with each strike. This is a corrupted version, but the core nature remains. Naruto opened another portal, calling forth a massive axe, Ama no Ohabari. The storm cleaver that had severed heaven from earth in ancient myth. With the bull entity partially restrained by Enkidu's chains, he charged forward, the divine weapon raised to strike. The axe connected with the creature's metallic hide, and for a moment, reality itself seemed to waver around the point of impact. Then the bull's skin split open, revealing not blue or flesh but a swirling vortex of golden energy beneath. Its physical form is just a container. Naruto shouted to Tenten, the real entity is inside. Understanding immediately, Tenten adjusted her attack, producing a specialized scroll from which she summoned a net of chakra-conductive wire threaded with paper seals. Get it wider, she called to Naruto, preparing to capture whatever emerged from the breach. Naruto swung the axe again, expanding the tear in the bull's hide. The energy within pulsed and churned, trying to maintain cohesion as its container failed. With perfect timing, Tenten launched her net directly into the opening, the seals activating on contact with the entity's true form. A shriek of rage and pain erupted from the bull as the net contracted, drawing the energy out from its metallic shell. The empty container collapsed like a discarded puppet, while the captured essence thrashed within Tenten's specialized containment. Seal complete, she announced, channeling additional chakra to reinforce the binding patterns. Naruto didn't waste time celebrating. Around the courtyard, his teammates were engaged in fierce combat with the human attackers, who had proven more formidable than their appearance suggested. Many wielded weapons that, while not from the gate itself, had clearly been enhanced by similar principles, blades that cut through stone as easily as air. Shields that repelled jutsu without visible effort. They've been studying the artifacts, Naruto realized aloud. Creating imitations. Pale shadows of the true treasury, Casimir agreed, appear. Beside him with unsettling suddenness. But dangerous nonetheless, especially in numbers. Across the courtyard, Sakura smashed her chakra-enhanced fist into the ground, creating a shockwave that disrupted the eastern attacker's formation. Hinata moved through the resulting chaos with the precision of her gentle fist style, disabling opponents with targeted strikes to chakra points. On the western side, Kakashi and Sai worked in seamless coordination, the copy ninja herding enemies into positions where Sai's animated ink constructs could ensnare or neutralize them with minimal collateral damage to the seal array. But as one group of attackers fell, another breached the southern wall, and with them came two more entities similar to the corrupted Gugalana, though smaller and faster. They're targeting the portal specifically, Tenten observed, securing her captured entity to a stable point before rejoining Naruto. This isn't a random attack, it's a coordinated attempt to seize control of the connection. Naruto nodded grimly, already opening new portals. This time, he called forth weapons designed for area control rather than single target damage, Vijaya, the bow that never missed its mark, and a quiver of arrows that split into multiple projectiles in flight. As he launched the first volley, each arrow dividing into 7 perfect duplicates midair, Naruto felt the gate respawn. Ding to his tactical needs more fluidly than ever before. The weapons emerged precisely where he needed them, already aligned for optimal deployment, as if the gate itself was anticipating his strategy. The treasury recognizes battle conditions, the custodian observed from the portal, still maintaining its position despite the chaos. Adaptation protocols activating. What does that mean? Naruto called, even as he directed a second volley of arrows toward the new entities. The gateway configures to wielder requirements during conflict, the custodian explained with its peculiar formal syntax. Efficiency increases proportional to legitimate defense necessity. Indeed, Naruto could feel the difference, a warming of the connection between himself and the gate, a reduction in the effort required to maintain multiple portals simultaneously. Where before he might have struggled to coordinate more than 6 or 7 weapons at once, he now found himself easily managing twice that number, each responding to his will with instantaneous precision. Naruto. Sakura's voice cut through the din of battle. Something's happening with the portal. He turned to see the connection point between realities fluctuating wildly, its edges pulsing with colors that hurt the eye to observe directly. The custodian had moved closer to the threshold on its side, apparently working to stabilize the deteriorating conditions. The attack creates harmonic disruptions, Casimir explained, deflecting an enemy blade with his staff. The portal requires constant maintenance to remain stable. He cast a significant glance at Naruto. If it collapses chaotically rather than being properly closed, the resulting reality fracture could devastate everything within several kilometers. Convenient detail to mention now, Naruto replied tersely, even as he calculated their options. The battle was winnable. His team was gradually gaining the upper hand against the human attackers and the smaller entities were vulnerable to the gate's weapons, but not quickly enough to prevent the portal's deterioration. A decision formed in his mind, instinctive yet clear. Cover me, he instructed Tenten, already moving toward the central platform where the portal pulsed with increasing instability. She nodded, immediately positioning herself to intercept any attacks directed his way. Whatever you're planning, make it fast, she called after him. Naruto approached the threshold, feeling the distortion in reality growing stronger with each step. The custodian observed his approach from the other side, its indistinct features somehow conveying curiosity. The wielder approaches the boundary, it noted. Unprecedented protocol violation potential. I need to stabilize this, Naruto stated firmly, before it collapses and damages both our worlds. The custodian seemed to consider this direct treasury interface with threshold matrix might achieve temporary stabilization. Significant risk to wielder consciousness integrity. Meaning what, exactly? Naruto demanded, aware of the battle raging around them and the rapidly deteriorating portal. Your mind, linked to 2 realities simultaneously, Casimir translated. Appearing at Naruto's side again. Experiencing both at once. Few can withstand such division without permanent damage. But it would work. Naruto pressed, already reaching a decision regardless of the risk. Theoretically, Casimir confirmed. The gate exists partially in both realities already. By extending that connection through yourself as the wielder, you could create a stabilizing bridge. Naruto nodded. Decision made. Tell me what to do. Open the gate directly adjacent to the portal, Casimir instructed, moving to adjust the artifacts arranged on the platform. Not we. Happens this time. Call forth the treasury itself, the dimensional space where the weapons reside. Naruto had never attempted this before, had not even known it was possible. Yet as soon as Casimir suggested it, knowledge unfolded in his mind. As if the gate itself were providing the necessary understanding. He reached deeper into the connection than ever before, not calling forth specific items but accessing the fundamental space that contained them all. A golden portal opened beside the unstable threshold, larger than any he had created previously, glowing with intense radiance that illuminated the entire courtyard. Through it, Naruto could see the infinite expanse of the treasury, countless weapons and treasures suspended in a golden void that extended beyond perception. The sight was breathtaking, even in the midst of crisis. Now, Casimir directed, extend your awareness into both spaces simultaneously. Feel the resonance between them. They are aspects of the same fundamental reality, separated only by perception. Naruto closed his eyes, focusing his consciousness as directed. He felt the gate's familiar warmth, the treasury's expansive presence, and beside it, the unstable energies of the portal. Chaotic yet patterned in their fluctuations. Gradually, he extended his awareness to encompass both, creating a bridge through his own consciousness. The sensation was unlike anything he had experienced before, his perception splitting, expanding, existing in multiple states simultaneously. Through one facet of awareness, he remained in the courtyard, physically present amidst the battle. Through another, he floated within the treasury, surrounded by its collected wonders. And through a third, he perceived the golden hull where the custodian stood, its true form now visible too. His expanded consciousness, a being of pure conceptual energy, maintaining the integrity of a space that existed between realities rather than fully within any of them. The wielder achieves triple state consciousness. The custodian observed, its voice now perfectly clear to Naruto's enhanced perception. Adaptation exceeds projected parameters. Pain lanced through Naruto's mind as he struggled to maintain the complex awareness. Human consciousness wasn't designed for such division, such simultaneous existence across different planes of reality. Yet he persisted, drawing on both his natural, stubborn determination and the Nine Tails' resilience. I've got you, Kit, Kurama's voice echoed through his fragmented awareness. This isn't so different from when we share consciousness between your mind and the seal space. The fox's support provided crucial stability, allowing Naruto to focus on the task at hand. He could feel the resonance patterns between the treasury and the portal, could see how they interacted. Where the harmonies aligned and where dissonance created instability. Working instinctively, he began adjusting the connection, using the gate's stable presence to dampen the portal's fluctuations. It was like tuning an instrument of unimaginable complexity, each adjustment affecting countless interconnected patterns. Gradually, the chaotic pulsing of the portal stabilized, its edges becoming more defined. Its colors settling into a steady golden hue that matched the gate beside it. Threshold stabilization at 70% and rising, the custodian reported. Harmonic. Convergence approaching sustainable parameters. In the courtyard, the battle had shifted. With the portal stabilizing, the remaining entities seemed to lose focus and purpose, their attacks becoming uncoordinated and ineffective. The human forces, seeing their advantage disappearing, began a tactical withdrawal, covering their retreat with smoke bombs and diversionary explosives. They're pulling back, Kakashi reported, joining Tenten in forming a defensive perimeter around Naruto's position. Whatever you're doing, it's working. Naruto barely heard him, his consciousness still divided between realities. The stabilization was working, but maintaining it required constant attention, constant adjustment of the harmonic resonance between the spaces. The wielder cannot sustain this indefinitely, the custodian observed. Human consciousness has limitations, even when supported by secondary entities. He doesn't need to, Casimir replied, moving to adjust the artifacts on the platform again. Once stability reaches 90%, we can implement a controlled closure protocol. True to his word, when the portal's stabilization reached the specified threshold, Casimir began a CQ. Ents of adjustments to the artifacts and seals. The portal began to contract gradually, its connection to the other reality narrowing without the chaotic fluctuations that had threatened catastrophic collapse. You can release now, Naruto. Casimir instructed. The closure sequence is self-sustaining. With immense relief, Naruto began withdrawing his consciousness from the divided state, bringing his awareness back to a single focus in the physical world. The process wasn't instantaneous. Fragments of perception lingered in the treasury and the Golden Hall, creating a momentary sensation of being stretched between locations. Then, with a final effort assisted by Kurama's steadying presence, he snapped fully back into his body in the courtyard. The gate closed automatically as his concentration broke, the golden portal winking out of existence. The effort left him staggering, consciousness threatening to fade entirely. Strong hands caught him, Sakura on one side, Hinata on the other, supporting his weight as his legs threatened to buckle. Easy, Sakura murmured, her medical training already prompting her to check his pulse and pupil response. That was something I've never seen before. Is he all right? Tenten asked anxiously, maintaining her guard position despite the enemy's retreat. Vital signs stable, Sakura reported. But his chakra network is showing unusual patterns of activity. Triple state consciousness creates temporary neural restructuring, Casimir explained, his attention divided between Naruto's condition and the final stages of the portal's closure. The mind must create new pathways to process simultaneous existence across multiple realities. Will there be permanent effects? Hinata asked, her Byakugan active as she examined the changes in Naruto's energy systems. That depends on his resilience and adaptability, Casimir replied. Though the presence of the Nine Tails likely provides significant protection against lasting damage. The portal had contracted to a small circle now, barely 30 centimeters in diameter. Through it, the custodian could still be seen, observing the process with its alien attention. Final communication before closure, it stated. The wielder has demonstrated unexpected capabilities. Cycle parameters adjusted accordingly. Monitoring will continue at enhanced priority. With those cryptic words, the portal closed completely. The seal array beneath it going dark as the connection between realities severed. Silence fell over the courtyard, broken only by the groans of wounded combatants and the settling of debris from the battle. Casimir's workers moved efficiently to secure the area, tending to their injured and taking stock of the damage. Naruto's strength was returning gradually, his consciousness settling back into familiar patterns. With Sakura and Hinata's help, he straightened, taking stock of their situation. Everyone okay? He asked, looking around at his team. Minor injuries only, Kakashi reported. His uniform torn in several places but no serious wounds visible. The attackers retreated once the portal stabilized. They were after the connection specifically, Sai observed, his creatures patrolling the perimeter to ensure the enemy didn't return. Once that objective became unattainable, they withdrew rather than fight to the last. Professional, Tenten added. Disciplined. Not normal bandits or even typical missing nin. They are called the Harbingers, Casimir explained, approaching their group. A organization dedicated to facilitating unrestricted passage between realities. Believing that the natural order should be restructured. You know them well, Kakashi noted, his tone making it more accusation than observation. I've encountered them numerous times over the years. Casimir acknowledged without defensiveness. They seek artifacts from the treasury for the same reason I do, but while I work to understand and control the interactions between worlds, they wish to dissolve the boundaries entirely. Why? Naruto asked, the question simple but fundamental. Various motivations, Casimir shrugged slightly. Some believe that humanity was meant to exist across all realities. That our confinement to a single world is artificial and limiting. Others serve the entities that wish to cross over, beings that promise power or knowledge in exchange for assistance. His expression darkened, and some simply crave the chaos that would result from uncontrolled merging of realities. And your motivation? Hinata asked quietly, her perceptive gaze fixed on Casimir's face. What drives your interest in these artifacts and connections? For the first time, Casimir seemed momentarily at a loss for words. Something complicated passed across his features. A mixture of emotions too complex to easily categorize. Balance, he said finally. I seek to understand the principles that govern the separation of realities, and to ensure that knowledge isn't lost or misused. He turned to Naruto. Which brings me to the true purpose of today's demonstration, before we were so rudely interrupted. I thought the communication with the custodian was the purpose, Naruto said. Still wary despite Casimir's assistance during the battle. A means, not an end, Casimir corrected. The communication provided context. What follows is the substance. He gestured toward the center of the platform, where the artifacts used to stabilize the portal remained arranged in their precise configuration. I offer you a choice, wielder of the treasury. What kind of choice? These artifacts, Casimir indicated the weapons and items on the platform, represent years of careful collection and study. Each connects to the treasury you now command, each contains knowledge and power you have yet to fully understand. His pale eyes fixed on Naruto's. I offer them to you, freely given, to enhance your connection to the gate and expand your understanding of its capabilities. The offer was unexpected, generating looks of surprise and suspicion from the Konoha ninja. What's the catch? Sakura asked bluntly. In exchange, Casimir continued, I ask only that you agree to work with me to prepare for what's coming, the increased incursions, the entities seeking passage, the destabilization of the barriers between worlds. He spread his hands, not as subordinate to superior, but as allies facing a common threat. Why would you give up artifacts you've spent years collecting? Tenten asked, her expertise with weapons making her particularly suspicious of such generosity. Because they serve their purpose better in the wielder's possession, Casimir replied. The treasury calls to itself, seeks reunification. These pieces I've gathered are like satellites orbiting a star, drawn to the central mass. More powerful when in proper alignment with it. Naruto studied the artifacts thoughtfully. There was truth in Casimir's words, he could feel the connection between the gate within him and the items on the platform, a resonance that suggested they were indeed fragments of the same whole. Yet caution remained. And this alliance you propose, what exactly would it entail? Information exchange. Primarily, Casimir said, I share my research on the nature of the incursions, the entities involved, the cycle's previous manifestations. You share insights gained from your direct connection to the treasury. He gestured to the courtyard around them. Occasionally, joint operations like this one, controlled experiments and observations of the interactions between realities. Under whose authority? Kakashi asked. Konoha has its own chain of command, its own protocols for handling threats. I'm not asking him to abandon his village loyalties, Casimir clarified. Merely to recognize that what we face transcends conventional political boundaries. The threats emerging don't care about hidden villages or daimyo territories. It was a compelling argument. And Naruto could see the logic in cooperating with someone who clearly possessed extensive knowledge about the gate and the incursions. Yet something held him back from immediate agreement, a sense that Casimir, for all his apparent openness, still harbored deeper motives he wasn't revealing. I need to consult with the Hokage before making any formal alliance, Naruto said finally. But I'll consider your offer. Casimir nodded, seemingly unsurprised by the cautious response. A reasonable position. The artifacts remain available regardless of your decision on the broader alliance. He gestured to the platform. They are yours by right as the treasury's chosen wielder. I merely facilitated their return to proper ownership. With that statement, Casimir stepped back, giving Naruto space to approach the platform and the items arranged upon it. Cautiously, Naruto moved forward, extending his senses to examine the artifacts more closely. Each resonated with the gate within him, confirming their authentic connection to the treasury. He recognized them from the fragmentary knowledge that had come with his inheritance, a sword that could cut through conceptual bonds as easily as physical ones. A shield that adapted to counter whatever threatened its wielder, a spear that grew heavier with each successive strike until nothing could withstand its impact, and several other items of similar significance. As he reached the platform, Naruto opened a portal beside him, not to withdraw weapons this time, but to receive these fragments back into the treasury where they belonged. One by one, he lifted the artifacts, feeling each one's unique properties and history before guiding it into the golden void. With each return, he sensed the gate growing somehow more complete, more coherent in its organization. Knowledge accompanied each artifact, flashes of insight about its origins, its uses in Gilgamesh's hands, its place in the overall structure of the treasury. When the last item had been reclaimed, Naruto closed the portal. Turning back to where Casimir observed with evident satisfaction. You feel it, don't you? The silver-haired man asked. The expansion of connection, the NCR, eased coherence of the Treasury's internal organization. Naruto nodded, unable to deny the effect. The gate feels more accessible. Like pathways have been cleared that were previously obscured. Exactly. Casimir's enthusiasm was genuine. The Treasury isn't merely a collection of weapons, it's an integrated system, each component relating to all others in a complex harmonic structure. The Re components properly aligned within it, the more efficiently it functions as a whole. And the more powerful it becomes, Kakashi added, his tone carefully neutral. Power is a byproduct, not the primary purpose, Casimir corrected. Though yes, the Treasury's effective capabilities increase with greater internal coherence. He turned back to Naruto. Consider my offer of alliance. The RS won't abandon their goals after one defeat, and the entities seeking passage grow more determined with each successful incursion, however brief. I'll deliver your proposal to the Hokage, Naruto promised. Along with our assessment of today's events. Casimir seemed satisfied with this response. Fair enough. You know how to contact me when you've reached a decision. He gestured around the courtyard, where his workers were already beginning to dismantle the seal array and pack equipment. We'll be departing shortly. The location is compromised now that the Harbingers have identified it. With negotiations concluded for the moment, the Konoha team regrouped at the edge of the courtyard to assess their situation and plan their return journey. Despite the battle's intensity, they had emerged relatively unscathed, minor injuries that Sakura efficiently treated with medical ninjutsu. Thoughts? Naruto asked once they were somewhat removed from Casimir's operation. He's hiding something, Tenten stated immediately. The artifacts were given too freely. Agreed, Kakashi nodded. Though they do seem to be legitimate pieces of the Treasury, and their return has clearly benefited your connection to the gate. His knowledge is extensive, Hinata observed. More detailed than someone who's merely studied artifacts from the outside. He speaks as if he has direct experience with the Treasury's principles. The communication with the custodian wasn't their first contact either, Sakura added. They had established protocols, shared understanding. And the timing of the Harbingers' attack was convenient, Sai noted. His analytical mind always considering strategic implications. It provided a perfect demonstration of the threat he's warning about, reinforcing his argument for alliance. Naruto considered all these points, weighing them against his own impressions. He could have arranged the attack himself, he acknowledged. But the risk would have been enormous if the portal had collapsed chaotically. I don't think he was bluffing about the potential damage. Perhaps not arranged, Kakashi suggested, but anticipated. He might have known the demonstration would attract attention and proceeded anyway. Using the likely attack as an opportunity to demonstrate both the threat and his willingness to counter it. It was a plausible theory, aligning with the calcula. Nature Casimir had displayed throughout their interactions. Whatever his ultimate goals, the man was clearly several steps ahead in his planning, positioning pieces on a board whose full dimensions remained obscured. We report everything to Tsunade, Naruto decided. Full details, including the reclaimed artifacts and the expanded connection to the gate. He glanced back toward the central platform, where Casimir was supervising the dismantling of the equipment. Whatever game he's playing, we need to understand it better before committing to any alliance. With that resolution, they prepared to depart, leaving Sai's ink constructs to monitor the site from a distance and track Casimir's movements after they left. The mission had yielded valuable intelligence, if not complete clarity about the threats they faced or Casimir's role in addressing them. As they moved through the forested hills away from the ruins, Naruto found himself reflecting on the custodian's parting words, cycle parameters adjusted accordingly. Something about their encounter had changed the expected pattern, altered the anticipated course of events. Was it his unusual connection to the gate, enhanced by the Nine Tails' presence? The unique properties of chakra interacting with the Treasury's energy? Or something else entirely? Some quality or decision that had shifted the trajectory of whatever cycle governed the Treasury's manifestations across realities. These questions accompanied them as they journeyed back toward Konoha, where further challenges and decisions awaited, not least among them, how Respond to Casimir's offer of alliance against threats whose full nature remained shrouded in mystery and prophecy. The reclaimed artifacts had strengthened Naruto's connection to the gate, expanding his access to its capabilities. But with that expanded access came greater responsibility and deeper questions about the power he now wielded and the role it would play in the conflicts to come. One thing was certain. The Collector's Challenge had been more than a simple test or demonstration. It had been the opening move in a game whose rules and stakes were only beginning to become clear, a game played across realities, with consequences that could reshape the very nature of their world. The sun was setting as they approached Konoha's gates, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. At cast long shadows across the forest path. Despite the physical distance they'd covered, Naruto's thoughts remained centered on the events at the ruins, the portal, the custodian, Casimir's offer, and most significantly, the expanded connection to the gate he now experienced. Throughout the journey home, he had felt the changes solidifying within him, pathways opening in his mind that provided clear access to the treasury's contents and principles. Where before he had glimpsed fragments of knowledge about individual weapons, now he perceived broader patterns, deeper structures underlying the gate's organization. "You've been quiet," Hinata observed, dropping back from the group to walk beside him as the village gates came into view. "Is it the artifacts? Have they affected you somehow?" Naruto nodded, appreciating her perceptiveness. "It's like, imagine reading individual pages torn from a book, versus having chapters properly arranged. I'm seeing connections I couldn't perceive before. Is it overwhelming?" she asked, genuine concern in her pale eyes. "Not exactly," he replied thoughtfully. "More clarifying. Things that seemed random now show clear purpose and design." He smiled slightly. "It's like the difference between knowing individual jutsu versus understanding the principles of chakra manipulation that connect them all." Hinata considered this. "Your chakra patterns have stabilized since the integration. The Byakugan shows your network flowing more harmoniously now, the golden pathways fully incorporated rather than overlaid." "I can feel that too," Naruto confirmed. "The gate's energy doesn't feel foreign anymore. It's become part of me in a way it wasn't before." They walked in comfortable silence for a moment before Hinata spoke again. "What do you think of Casimir's offer? Beyond the artifacts themselves?" It was a question Naruto had been pondering throughout their journey. "His knowledge is valuable," he acknowledged. "And the threats he warns about are real, we've seen that firsthand. But you don't fully trust his motivations," Hinata finished when he hesitated. "Exactly. He presents himself as a scholar, a curator protecting important knowledge. But there's something more driving him, something personal he isn't sharing." Naruto frowned slightly. "And I can't help wondering why the gate rejected him if his intentions are as noble as he claims." "Perhaps it did not reject him," Hinata suggested. "Perhaps it simply chose another." The distinction was subtle but significant, offering a perspective Naruto hadn't considered. Before he could explore it further, they reached the village gates where Izumo and Kotetsu stood their eternal watch. "Welcome back," Kotetsu greeted them with a wave. "Lady Hokage left orders for your Te. I'm to report directly to her office upon return, no delays." "That urgent?" Kakashi asked, raising an eyebrow. "Apparently," Izumo confirmed. "A messenger arrived from the Land of Iron this morning. Messing about divine manifestations at their sacred mountain sites." The team exchanged concerned glances. "More incursions, potentially, spreading beyond Fire Country's borders. We'll head there immediately," Naruto assured the gate guards, already adjusting their course toward the Hokage Tower. Tsunade was waiting for them in her office, Shizune and Shikamaru at her side as usual. Maps covered her desk, marked with colored pins similar to those they'd seen during their pre-mission briefing, but with many more locations highlighted. "Report," she commanded as they entered, not bothering with pleasantries. Kakashi took the lead, delivering a concise summary of their mission: the demonstration at the ruins, the communication with the custodian, the Harbinger's attack, and Casimir's offer of alliance. Naruto and the others added details as needed, presenting a comprehensive overview of the complex events they'd witnessed. Tsunade listened without interruption, her expression growing progressively more troubled. When they finished, she leaned back in her chair, fingers steepled before her. "So Casimir claims these incursions are merely the beginning," she summarized. and offers all alliance against the greater threats to come, along with access to his research and remaining artifacts. That's the essence of it, Naruto confirmed. Though I'm not convinced we're getting the full picture of his motivations or goals. Few reveal their true motivations in initial negotiations, Tsunade observed dryly. The question is whether his assistance is valuable enough to offset the risk of hidden agendas. She gestured to the maps before her. These mark reported anomalies across the 5 great nations and beyond in the past week alone. 23 incidents matching the pattern of incursions you've described. 23, Tenten echoed, shocked by the number. That's a massive escalation. Indeed, Tsunade agreed grimly. And it's not just us. The Land of Iron reports strange phenomena at their sacred mountains. The Land of Water has experienced unexplained storms that seem to tear holes in reality itself. Even the Land of Wind, with all its open spaces and sparse population, has recorded multiple incidents at ancient ruin sites. The cycle accelerates, Naruto murmured, recalling the custodian's words. Which brings us to the critical question. Tsunade fixed her gaze on him. What are we dealing with exactly? Not just isolated incursions anymore, but a pattern spreading across the entire known world. Naruto considered how to explain concepts he himself was still struggling to fully grasp. Based on everything we've learned, including the expanded knowledge from the reclaimed artifacts, it seems to be a recurring phenomenon. The gate manifests in a world, a wielder emerges. And this somehow thins the barriers between realities, allowing incursions from the world where the gate originated. But why? Shikamaru pressed. What's the purpose of this cycle? What does it accomplish? Exchange. Naruto replied, drawing on the new insights that had clarified since integrating the reclaimed artifacts. The treasury doesn't just contain weapons, it contains knowledge, principles, concepts from one reality that can influence and evolve another. Cultural cross-pollination on a cosmic scale, Kakashi suggested, grasping the concept quickly. Something like that, Naruto nodded. But it's not supposed to happen chaotically. The judges, the custodians, they oversee the process, maintain certain boundaries and protocols. He frowned. What's happening now seems to be an acceleration or disruption of the normal cycle. Due to your unique nature as a Jinchuriki, Tsunade surmised. Partly, Naruto acknowledged. But there's more to it. Casimir Menchio. Ned, that our world's chakra creates unusual interactions with the gate's energy. And then there are the harbingers actively trying to break down the barriers completely. Tsunade sighed, massaging her temples. So we have natural incursions accelerated by your unique connection to the gate, potentially hostile entities trying to cross over, and human factions actively working to facilitate unrestricted passage between realities. She looked up at the assembled ninja. No wonder the Land of Iron samurai are reporting divine manifestations. They probably don't have any context for what they're experiencing. Which brings us back to Casimir's offer, Shikamaru noted. His knowledge and resources could be valuable in understanding and addressing these proliferating incidents. But at what cost? Sakura questioned. Alliance means shared information, shared operations. How much of Konoha's resources and attention get diverted to his agenda? And can we trust that agenda aligns with our own? Sai added, ever the pragmatist. Tsunade considered all perspectives, her sharp mind weighing risks against potential benefits. We need more information before committing to any formal alliance, she decided. But limited cooperation may be necessary given the scale of what we're facing. She turned to Naruto. These reclaimed artifacts, how have they affected your connection to the gate? Significantly, he replied honestly. I understand the treasury's structure and principles more clearly now. My control has improved, and I can access aspects of its power that were previously obscured. Enough to help address these incursions across multiple nations. Naruto hesitated. Possibly. But not alone, and not simultaneously. There are too many, too widely dispersed. Then we need to prioritize, Tsunade stated firmly. Focus on understanding the pattern, predicting where major incursions might occur rather than responding to every minor breach. She turned to Shikamaru. Establish a task force specifically for analyzing these incidents. I want to know if there's a discernible pattern to their locations and timing. Already underway, Shikamaru confirmed. Preliminary analysis suggests clustering around sites of historical or spiritual significance, ancient temples, sacred mountains, places where the boundary between the physical and spiritual worlds has traditionally been considered thinner. That aligns with what the custodian implied, Naruto noted. The cycle has manifested before, possibly leaving traces in our world that we've interpreted through religious or mythological frameworks. So what's our response to Casimir? Kakashi brought the discussion back to the immediate decision. Tsunade considered for a moment longer. Limited cooperation, she decided. Quote, "We accept the return of artifacts belonging to the treasury as beneficial to Naruto's development with the gate. We share information about incursion patterns and coordinate responses where practical. But no formal alliance yet, and no integration of his operations with Konoha's command structure. And his research?" Hinata asked. "The knowledge he's gathered about previous cycles and the entities involved. We request access as a condition of our cooperation," Tsunade replied. "Information exchange should flow both ways." She fixed her gaze on Naruto. "You'll be our primary liaison with Casimir. Your connection to the gate makes you best positioned to evaluate the validity of his claims and the value of his knowledge." "Understood." Naruto nodded, accepting the responsibility. "There's one more thing," Tsunade added, her expression growing more serious. "The other hidden villages have noticed these incidents as well. The Raikage has called for an emergency summit of the 5 Kage to discuss a coordinated response." This was significant news. Since the end of the Fourth Great Ninja War, the 5 Kage had maintained more open communication, but emergency summits remained rare, reserved for threats of extraordinary magnitude. "When?" Kakashi asked. 3 days from now, at a neutral location in the Land of Iron." Tsunade's gaze remained on Naruto. "And yes, you'll be accompanying me. If these incursions are connected to the gate, the other cage will need to hear directly from its wielder." The implications were clear. Naruto would need to explain his connection to the gate of Babylon to leaders who might view such power with suspicion or covetousness. The political dimensions of the situation were expanding alongside the supernatural threats. "There's a lot to prepare," Tsunade concluded, rising from her desk. "Get some rest tonight. Tomorrow, we begin intensive planning for both the summit and our response to these proliferating incursions." She fixed each of them with a firm stare. "What we're facing appears unprecedented in our recorded history. We'll need every resource, every insight, and every alliance we can trust to address it effectively." With the meeting concluded, the team departed the Hokage Tower, each processing the implications of what they'd learned and the decisions that had been made. Night had fallen completely now, the village streets illuminated by lanterns and the occasional glow from apartment windows. "Food," Tenten suggested practically. "We haven't eaten properly since this morning." The suggestion was met with unanimous agreement. They made their way to a small restaurant near the tower, not Ichiraku, which would be closing soon, but a traditional establishment that served meals late into the evening. The familiar routine of sharing a meal provided welcome normalcy after the extraordinary events of the day. As they ate, conversation flowed more casually, touching on aspects of their mission that hadn't seemed appropriate to discuss in the formal briefing. The strange beauty of the custodian's hall glimpsed through the portal, the impressive coordination of Casimir's operation despite the unexpected attack, the peculiar weapons wielded by the harbingers. Their blades had unusual properties, Tenten noted, her expertise with weapons making her observations particularly valuable. Not true noble phantasms from the treasury, but altered somehow, enhanced with principles derived from studying the originals. Reverse engineering, Sai suggested. Creating functional approximations based on observed effects rather Han understanding the underlying mechanisms. Dangerous, Kakashi commented. Imitating powers you don't fully comprehend rarely ends well. The conversation shifted to the upcoming Cage Summit and had it might mean for Naruto's role in addressing the proliferating incursions. The other villages will have concerns about one hidden village controlling such power, Sakura pointed out. Even with our improved relations since the war, traditional rivalries and suspicions remain. The incursions themselves may help there, Kakashi suggested. A common threat tends to focus attention on practica. Cooperation rather than political advantage. Unless someone tries to exploit the situation, Hinata noted quietly. Not everyone views extraordinary powers as responsibilities rather than opportunities. Her observation hung in the air. A reminder that not all parties would approach these developments with Konoha's perspective or values. The Gate of Babylon represented power on a scale that could disrupt the delicate balance between nations, a fact that would not be lost on leaders responsible for protecting their village's interests. As the meal concluded, they prepared to go their separate ways for the night, each needing rest after the long mission and intense debriefing. Naruto found himself reluctant to return immediately to his apartment, his mind still processing the day's events and the expanded awareness of the gate that continued to unfold within him. "I think I'll walk for a while," he decided as they exited the restaurant. "Clear my head before trying to sleep." "Want company?" Hinata offered. Her intuition is always attuned to his unsettled state. Naruto smiled gratefully. "Actually, yeah, if you're not too tired." The others bid them good night, heading to their respective homes. Naruto and Hinata walked in comfortable silence through Konoha's quieter evening streets, eventually finding themselves on the path that led up to the Hokage Monument, a favorite spot for our contemplation with its panoramic view of the village. They settled on a bench near the summit, the carved faces of previous Hokage visible in the moonlight behind them, the village spread out below like a constellation of earthbound stars. "How are you really doing with all this?" Hinata asked after a few minutes of peaceful silence. "Not just the gate itself, but everything that comes with it, the expectations, the responsibility, the attention from beings from another reality." It was precisely the question Naruto needed, not focused on tactical considerations or political implications, but on his personal experience navigating this extraordinary situation. "Honestly," he sighed, "it's overwhelming sometimes. Not the power itself. I've handled that before with Kurama and Sage Mode. It's he sensed that I've become part of something much bigger than I understand, some cycle or pattern that's been repeating across realities for who knows how long." Hinata nodded, her expression thoughtful in the moonlight. "You didn't choose this role." "No," he agreed. "But then, I didn't choose to be a Jinchuriki either. Life has a way of assigning responsibilities regardless of plans or preferences." He smiled ruefully. "At least this time, the power itself chose me rather than being sealed inside me as an infant." "That matters," Hinata observed. "The gate accepted you for qualities it recognized. Qualities aligned with its purpose." Her voice softened. "The same qualities others have always seen in you, even when you couldn't see them in yourself." The simple affirmation touched something deep in Naruto. Throughout his life, Hinata had been one of the few who had recognized his potential before he'd proven himself, who had believed in him when others dismissed or feared him. "Thank you," he said simply, "for always seeing me clearly." They sat in companionable silence for a while longer, the peaceful view contrasting with the tumultuous changes occurring in the wider world. Eventually, Naruto's thoughts returned to the practical challenges awaiting them. "The Cage Summit will be interesting," he remarked. "Explaining the gate to leaders who haven't witnessed it firsthand won't be easy." "You've always had a gift for helping others understand complex things through direct demonstration," Hinata reminded him. "Your strength has never been theoretical explanations but practical evidence." Naruto chuckled. "True, maybe I should just open a portal and pull out a legendary weapon or two. That would get the point across." "Perhaps with slightly more diplomatic framing," Hinata suggested with a smile. "But essentially, yes, show them what they need to understand rather than trying to explain concepts that may have no equivalent in our world's traditional knowledge." It was good advice, characteristic of Hinata's ability to translate Naruto's instinctive approaches into more refined strategies without losing their essential directness. Their conversation drifted to aspects of the situation, the potential for coordination with other villages in addressing the incursions, the challenge of balancing Konoha's responsibilities with the wider threats emerging across nations, the uncertainty about Casimir's true agenda beneath his scholarly persona. "There's something he's not telling us," Naruto mused. "Something personal driving his interest in the treasury and the cycle." "The most dedicated researchers often have personal connections to their subjects," Hinata observed. "Especially when those subjects involve powers beyond ordinary understanding. I just wish I knew what his endgame is." Naruto sighed. "It would make deciding how much to trust him a lot simpler." "Perhaps that's something to explore in your role as liaison," Hinata suggested. Understanding his motivations might be as important as accessing his knowledge. The insight was characteristic of her perceptiveness, looking beyond tactical considerations to the human elements that often determined outcomes more profoundly than raw power or strategic positioning. As the hour grew later, they finally decided to head back down to the village. Naruto walked Hinata to the Hyuga compound, their conversation shifting to lighter topics: village gossip, memories of earlier missions, the ongoing construction projects expanding Konoha's boundaries. At the compound entrance, they paused to say goodnight. "Thank you for the company," Naruto said, genuinely appreciative of the conversation and perspective she'd provided. "It helped more than you know." "Anytime," Hinata replied simply. "Whatever comes next, remember you don't face it alone. Not just me, all of us are with you in this." The reminder echoed what she had told him after Ino's birthday party, before the divine judgment, a trut that had proven itself repeatedly in the challenges they'd faced since then. Unlike Gilgamesh, who had stood alone in his power and arrogance until tragedy taught him the value of connection, Naruto entered these trials surrounded by friends and comrades whose diverse strengths complemented his own. With that reassurance warming his thoughts, Naruto returned to his apartment, ready for whatever rest he could find before tomorrow's intensive preparations. The reclaimed artifacts continued integrating with his awareness of the gate, pathways opening in his mind that would expand his capabilities and understanding when next called upon. Whatever the Cage Summit might bring, whatever Casimir's true agenda might reveal itself to be, whatever entities might emerge from the thinning barriers between realities, he would face them not as the isolated king of heroes, but as Naruto Uzumaki, strengthened by bonds that transcended even the power of the Gate of Babylon. Chapter 3 End.